Chapter 496. Luo Nan was an expert in mental senses. The integration and reconstruction of the external information structure was nothing to him. He was actually more concerned about the situation within his body. Right now, his 2 kidneys were trembling and heating up. Then his heart, liver, spleen, and lungs responded. Energy interweaved like a net and densely covered his entire body. It was clear that his 9 orifices and 6 roots internal cultivation technique had reached a critical juncture. Luo Nan took 2 deep breaths and adapted to his current state. He then sent a signal to Shuele. Shuele heard the signal and hurriedly retreated from the crowd. Luo Nan put away his digital pen and swept his eyes over the messy drawing page. He saved and exited. He frowned as soon as he exited to the starting interface. A woman's voice came through a second later. "You must be Junior Nan. I finally get to see you in person." Tianqi saw the newcomer and hurriedly got up to greet her, senior sister Fei. He had a bad feeling in his heart. This senior sister Fei was a relatively famous second-generation member of the society. She was the type that brought money into the group. She was willful and had quite an influence. Most importantly, Huang Bingjin, the society officer who had a conflict with Luo Nan and was still being treated in the hospital, belonged to her branch. Strictly speaking, there was an old grudge between the two. Some time ago, there were quite a few voices in the society that wanted to teach Luo Nan a lesson. Could it be that they were here? Tianqi was worried about how to remind Luo Nan, but he had to do an introduction first. "Brother Nan, this is senior sister Fei Jin. She's the general manager of the society's public relations department." He intentionally emphasized the word general manager in hopes of attracting Luo Nan's attention. Unfortunately, his careful plan was completely wasted. How could Luo Nan remember the name and position of a random soldier who had a grudge against him a month or 2 ago? Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. Under the dim lighting of the workshop, only a faint outline of Fei Jin's appearance could be seen. She could be considered beautiful and upright. Luo Nan had no interest in delving into the minute details. He just nodded and continued to pack up. Fei Jin walked forward with a giggle and let out a rather exaggerated sigh. "Wow, Junior Nan, I've heard of your name for a long time. I saw your video too. You're really super handsome. Junior, are you practicing martial arts? Is there really such a thing as internal strength? Can you teach me?" Under Tianqi's dumbfounded expression, Fei Jin's attitude was simply the attitude of a fan facing a celebrity. She put her palms together and bowed slightly, giving off the feeling of a young lady. Tianqi had never seen Fei Jin like this before. He was a little confused and asked subconsciously, "Video? The one that's very popular on the campus forum?" Fei Jin really didn't regard Luo Nan as an outsider. She directly sat on the other side of Luo Nan and leaned her body over. She naturally pressed half of her ample body against Luo Nan's elbow. Her hand slid across the flexible e-ink screen to carry out operations. Only then did he say hello. "I've left a message on it. You'll know when you open it. Wow, there are so few apps on it. What's this? You haven't finished downloading?" Fei Jin was a little curious. She tapped on the gray icon on the top half of the screen with her black-painted fingernail. Naturally, there was no response. Luo Nan's eyes narrowed. He extended his hand and pushed Fei Jin's fingers away. "There's no need to look anymore. I know what's going on." The cause of the matter was the day of the Municipal Plaza incident. Luo Nan lived in Ocean Sky Cloud City. He woke up early and went to school to jog and exercise. He exhaled like an arrow, and the hot air he exhaled shot far away. The visual effect was top-notch. It was unknown which busybody took a picture of it at the time and posted it on the school forum. It stirred up quite a bit of popularity. Tianqi, this fellow, lost his mind when he met a woman. He forgot that he was the one who brought up this video during the last club activity. He bragged in his small circle that Luo Nan and Shuele were Qigong experts in Eastern mysticism. Luo Nan closed his notebook and stood up. Tianqi guessed that Luo Nan was unhappy. It was as if his butt was pricked by needles. He jumped up in an instant. On the other side, Fei Jin got up quite quickly. She didn't seem to mind Luo Nan's cold and hard actions at all. She even hooked onto the crook of Luo Nan's arm. She looked quite clingy. Junior, let's add each other as friends. Let's keep in touch in the future. Shuele had already walked up to them at this time. He sized up the situation with curiosity. Luonan glanced at his elbow and saw Fei Jin's fingers pressed against it. She gently and slowly circled it. It was as if she was doing some small movements inadvertently. He didn't deliberately shake her off. He just said, I've gotten to know senior sister today. If we meet again in the future, I'll take this factor into consideration. Fei Jin was a bit startled. She raised her head and met Luo Nan's cold and clear gaze. Her heart stirred and her fingers froze. She didn't continue her small movements. It was at this time that their wristbands lit up at the same time. This wasn't the mechanical response of adding each other as friends. Though the brands and models of their wristbands were different, a dial-like interface of garbled code appeared on the floating virtual screen. Broken symbols shuttled back and forth, ultimately piecing together to form a classic DNA double helix structure. Then their wristbands vibrated, indicating that they had received a message. Luo Nan didn't react at all. He glanced at his wristband and went straight ahead. He soon left Fei Jin behind. Fei Jin didn't chase after him, but her originally stiff expression softened and returned to spring. Her lips hooked into a subtle curve. Brother Nan. Brother Nan. Tianqi chased after Luo Nan with quick steps. A layer of sweat had piled up on his forehead. Luo Nan didn't feel like bickering with him. He just said, help me ask for a leave. Leicesters too.
Oh.
Okay. Tianqi could only stop and watch as Luo Nan and Shuele walked out side by side. Who's that guy? He doesn't have any skills. Did he just come to strike up a conversation? Shuele asked in a low voice as they walked along the library corridor. He should be the representative of the funds behind the Mystic Arts Research Society. Small shareholders. Their ratio isn't high. I've seen them in the information before. I have a bit of an impression. Luo Nan had done his homework after the ownership of Gear was confirmed. Otherwise, he wouldn't have deliberately displayed a cold and hard attitude today. The conflict between him and the investors of the Mystic Arts Research Society would erupt sooner or later regarding the issue of Gear. From the looks of things, it was better to erupt sooner rather than later. He didn't mind making his attitude clear early on. However, the synchronized message from the two wristbands was unexpected. The DNA double helix was the brand logo of a high-end event. It was recommended by Mingtang Culture's Artist Department's manager Shaw. The organizer of the party would send out a message every few days. On one hand, it was a countdown reminder. On the other hand, it would probe the participants and unearth the hobbies of their customers. Luo Nan was a bit curious about the so-called high-end corrupted party, but he wasn't completely interested in it. He only kept this clue in mind that it might involve the mutant infection and even that mysterious Luo Yuan. Fei Jin was also an invited customer. It wasn't strange in itself. It was more or less a coincidence that they were together. Luo Nan didn't spend too much effort on this. Fei Jin's way of doing things couldn't be considered excessive. It could only be said that she was good at using her natural capital. But unfortunately, she chose a very bad time. Luo Nan and Shuele took the elevator to the first floor of the library. Luo Nan didn't speak anymore. His listening observation in the workshop suddenly became clear, indicating that the heat of his ear orifice had reached perfection. Then his kidney energy flowed, and the vital energy of his 5 viscera resonated. This proved that his cultivation of the 9 orifices and 6 roots technique had entered a critical stage. Shuele was close. He could faintly sense something, so he shut his mouth early on. At the same time, he notified Qin Ikuan and Gouda, who were on standby outside the building. Luo Nan exited the library with a few steps. He stepped into the gloomy sky that still had sporadic flying snow. The cold air of -20 degrees pressed in layer by layer. But the most important thing was the enormous amount of information and stimulation that surged over at this moment. Color, shape, temperature, sound, smell, and the layout of space were piled up layer by layer. They were reorganized over and over again. This external environment forced Luo Nan to make a corresponding response. At the same time, he differentiated between the meaningfulness of his response and the meaningfulness of it. He remolded his own instincts. Luo Nan's unique attainments in mental senses helped Luo Nan greatly in this regard. He was very clear on the judgment of information, the direction, and the technique of integration. He practically didn't need to take a detour, and he was able to put more mental energy into the transformation of his fleshly body. The 9 orifices and 6 roots technique was established on the basis of classical Eastern philosophy. It had always viewed cultivation as an interconnected whole. Luo Nan's ear orifice was perfected, and his kidney energy was budding. His entire body's essence, energy, and bone marrow all sensed it. It vibrated in a continuous manner, causing the entire skeleton structure of his entire body to become smooth. It also stimulated the heart, liver, spleen, lungs, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, tendons, bones, meridians, skin, flesh, hair, and so on. Layer by layer, they resonated, penetrated, and covered. This was the integration and understanding of the human body's structure. From Luo Nan's perspective, this was like a pair of incorporeal hands of creation. It controlled all the perceptible and measurable particles of matter. It piled up and fused together to form a grand and precise architectural structure. The corresponding structure guided energy and information from low to high. It climbed step by step. First, the foundation of matter was established. Then, the carrier of life was constructed. Then, the guidance was further refined to form a precise form for processing information. From the most basic reactions, the most basic emotions, to relatively clear thoughts and train of thought, all the way to high-level thoughts and emotions. Finally, Luo Nan took a step into the grand palace of the mind. The process of déjà vu corresponded with Luo Nan's feelings and awareness at all times. It allowed him to possess a clearer understanding. That's right. This was a grand building constructed from the material plane that led to the mental plane of nothingness. It was rooted in the fleshly body, yet it transcended above it. It was the Tower of Babel that connected the mental and the material. It was Mount Bujo that connected the limits of man and heaven. Though it didn't break away from Luo Nan's established order framework, it was just a demonstration of its reconstruction. It allowed the coupling relationship between Luo Nan's God gear and body gear to cut into a deeper plane. Rays of light rushed up from the bottom of the ice-cold and silent sea of God gear. The mental interfered with the material, and the material interfered with the mental. From the perspective of classical philosophy, yin and yang rubbed against each other. Clear and turbid intersected, triggering a penetrating attack of electricity. Brilliant electrical fire spread throughout every corner of the God gear and body gear structure. Under the effect of this power, the life and death orifices of the front and back were instantly connected. The interior of the body was a complete mess. Mountains and rocks were dense, and rivers flowed everywhere. It seemed contradictory, but it was the convergence and linking of different dimensional levels. Due to the expansion of the dimensional levels, the corresponding area of effect was naturally no longer limited by the basic structure of the body and soul. Instead, it naturally expanded outwards, causing incorporeal ripples to ripple in the surrounding void. Luo Nan's own logic, his own framework, formed a slight distortion towards the external world. Luo Nan stopped his steps in shock. He had unwittingly walked to the surface of a bridge. Beneath his feet was the river that cut through the forest that divided the north and south shores of the campus. Shuele and the other two took a step forward in unison. "What's wrong?" "Oh, I think I've awakened." It just so happened that a white-headed duck, a characteristic resident bird of the wetland jungle, swayed to the riverside. Perhaps it was confused by the floating snow, but it stepped onto the frozen surface of a lake. It was caught off guard and squawked. Chapter 497. Sprinkle flowers to congratulate a certain weakling for finally getting rid of his substitute hat and officially entering the 70,000-strong group. When are you going to hold a feast? Everyone will congratulate you. I will catch a fish as a gift. a congratulatory message from the bottom of the sea. Looking at this momentum, the rating companies of the inner world are going to explode. The military intelligence department will probably use your face as a target to throw darts at. Do you want me to take a few stacks of paper talismans from Old Gao? Honest Arts and Crafts store owner. I think President Ouyang is really going to explode. His self-logic theory will definitely need a revised version. The biology team of the society has been calling me to work overtime every day for the past 2 days. I can't even write my own thesis. Resentful medical worker. A psychic awakening in the fleshly mode. This is actually a wrong path. He might go berserk in the next moment, vomit blood, and die. Pessimistic believer. Damn, what's wrong with fleshly mode? Nanster, why don't you come to the wilderness? You don't have to go far. Let's do some assault training and consolidate. Former Special Forces soldier entering annual training. The main thing is how much my combat strength has increased. Everything else is meaningless. I can be a sparring partner. A low-key assassin.
Wrong.
Everything is a financial problem. The most important thing is how much my net worth has increased. Right now, the number of laboratories that want to find Boss Luo to breed has increased to 12. This is just the number of applications. I think that just by selling sperm, the big guy at Ocean Sky Cloud City would be able to change ownership. Erudite Doghead Advisor. Luo Nan was forcefully pulled into a temporary discussion group on the Psychic Wave network. This group included practically all the members of the society he knew. In a certain sense, everyone's enthusiasm was high. Congratulatory messages flew in like snowflakes. It was just that in the end, the direction was a bit off. Luo Nan rolled his eyes in response. He simply said, "I'm in class. It's my treat later." Then he set the discussion group's information to receive, but not remind mode. Then he raised his head and continued to seriously watch Gym Master Xiao write with Shuele. Right now, the environment he was in was quite odd. It was a -20-degree snowy day, but the front and back windows of the entire room were still open. There was no heating, air conditioning, or other heating facilities. The temperature inside and outside was practically the same. Snowflakes drifted in, accumulating a thin layer on the windowsill and the floor. Although he was meeting Dojo Master Xiao, this was no longer the Divine Yu Dojo. It was just a single apartment. The floor area was only 50 square meters, but since Gym Master Xiao didn't use much furniture and daily necessities, most of them were stuffed into the storage room downstairs. Thus, the room didn't seem crowded and even felt a little spacious. In the study, there was only a table and a chair. There were some paper books piled up in the corner. Brush, ink, paper, and inkstone were all available on the table. The paperweight was pressed against the top of the Xian paper, but when the air blew past, the edge of the paper still trembled slightly. But no matter what, wherever the tip of the brush landed, the surface of the paper was smooth and stable. The ink flowed, and in one breath, 32 words were written. The words read, "Heaven and earth set their positions, yin and yang of the universe. Changes are not permanent, comings and goings are impermanent. Transforming can," and Li was the Tao discipline framework. God knows how to transform, and virtue matches the heavens. While writing, Gym Master Xiao had casually explained that the general meaning of this passage was, there is a world inside the body, and there is another world outside the body. The two are ever-changing, and cultivators must grasp the core principles. Grasping order from the inside to the outside, connecting heaven and man. Only then can one's virtue match heaven and earth, and one's Tao surpass the ages. The word in it was Ji-gang. Luo Nan deeply believed in this. Discipline framework was order. It was efficiency. It was format. After his awakening, his body and soul interfered, and the level of dimensions expanded. The resources he grasped increased at an astonishing rate. His precision increased by a large margin under the crisscrossing senses of multiple dimensions and angles. Not to mention the external world, Luo Nan could already feel the subtle deformations of his nerve cell membranes when he focused his attention. The effects on the nerve endings led to a certain flow of bioelectricity, and even the entire process of forming specific nerve impulses. If a single nerve was like this, then the corresponding amount of information could be imagined when the entire nervous system was calculated. Expanding from the details, the complex structure of the human body was involved. On the cellular level, the human body was filled with traces of assembly. On the microscopic level, every cell was relatively independent, yet they were exquisitely assembled together. They endlessly produced the basic source substance needed for life, as well as the energy to sustain life. On a larger scale, the 5 viscera and 6 bowels, the fascia, the flesh, and the blood were all components of the human body system. They supplied energy, conducted energy, performed work, and realized various functions of a human body. If one wanted to completely control every detail of such a complex and precise system, the human brain would have to be replaced with a supercomputer. Only then would one need to have an extraordinarily powerful energy and heat dissipation system. Fortunately, humans had already formed a set of relatively perfect basic information processing methods during the long process of evolution. It was enough to deal with the majority of situations in normal life. Controlling resources and corresponding processing methods combined together was a type of self-format. It was just that it was a bit fuzzy and low-end. But for ability users and awakened ones, they needed to have more efficient, more concise, more precise, and more targeted choices in order to control power that far exceeded that of ordinary people, to reach a deeper level, and to even gain something from the vast heaven and earth. Gestalt, Shuelei's rune seed, the military's format of fire. Actually, all ability users cultivate and apply their usual methods. They are all discipline framework. They are all formats. It's just that there is a distinction between roughness and exquisiteness. There is a distinction between a small path and a great path. Gym Master Xiao washed away the ink on his brush and returned it to its original position on the rack. His words were like ink that had been moistened by the brush wash, fading into nothingness. All discipline framework formats need to be filled with details and laws. Otherwise, it would just be talking about the metaphysical. It sounds right, but it's actually irrelevant. On this point, I won't deny that the accumulation of the school of martial arts is still shallow. There are too many intuition experiences and philosophical speculations. In actual development, it is already far inferior to the archetype format, which has absorbed relevant experience and pushed forward with the power of the entire world. He played down the field that his school excelled in. Shuelei's mouth moved in response to this, but he didn't say anything in the end. Luo Nan's expression was calm as he pondered in detail. Gym Master Xiao faced Luo Nan. There's nothing much to teach you now that you've reached the awakened stage. After all, you still walk the path of the mental side. You don't need to engage in close combat with others. I just want to remind you that humanity's many years of research have yielded very abundant results. Building a car behind closed doors is the most foolish course of action. In this day and age, even if everyone works together, there will still be moats that cannot be filled, let alone others. Shuelei needs to remember this point as well. Luo Nan and Shuelei responded in unison. However, Luo Nan immediately said, "Gym Master, please spur me on from time to time in my cultivation from now on. I've been thinking about the problem of the format for the past 2 days. There are some unreliable ideas that I need Gym Master to review." Gym Master Xiao shook his head. "You won't let me have peace? I won't be able to control you for a few days." The two youths looked at each other. Shuelei raised his eyebrows at Luo Nan. His expression was nervous and fretful. Luo Nan knew what was going on. As the winter solstice approached, the arranged battle between the Thunder Falcon martial schools Duan Hong and Gym Master Xiao was imminent. Let's not talk about Duan Hong's strength. Let's not talk about Duan Hong's collusion with the military. Gym Master Xiao had to move, sit idly, practice calligraphy. Nothing else had been prepared. There was only half a month left until December 22nd. Shuelei grew more and more impatient the closer the time came. Luo Nan didn't understand Gym Master Xiao's plans at all, but he had a bad feeling. In the past, he couldn't see through Gym Master Xiao, so he didn't dare to forcefully probe him. After his awakening, Shuele instigated him to take advantage of the demonstration to roughly probe Jim Master Xiao. Jim Master Xiao's situation was terrible. The state of Jim Master Xiao's body was a complete mess. It was as if there was an atomic furnace that had gone out of control within his body. It constantly emitted catastrophic pulses, destroying everything in its surroundings. But before the pulses truly spread out of his body, they would magically dissolve one by one, not revealing themselves. If there was anything, it would just be an excessively high body temperature. Therefore, the windows of this apartment were still open during the frigid winter. Jim Master Xiao's exceedingly powerful foundation was manifested by such a method of dispelling. But the damage had already been done. The operating mechanism of his internal organs had been severely damaged, and it even touched upon the more fundamental genetic plane. It was something that Luo Nan could no longer understand. Was Jim Master Xiao strong? He was definitely strong. Even now, he still contained a terrifying power. But could he fight? Luo Nan didn't dare to think about it. From his perspective, Jim Master Xiao's internal organs might disintegrate and his body would be engulfed by internal fire if he made a slightly excessive move in his current terrible state. How did things reach this stage? Since things had reached this stage, Jim Master Xiao shouldn't accept the arranged battle. Luo Nan had already discussed this with Shuele. They had to dispel Jim Master Shue's thoughts of accepting the challenge no matter what. They could change the format. It could be a disciple fight, a group fight, or even a gym challenge. In any case, either Gym Master Xiao wouldn't accept the challenge, or the Gym Master would have to do the hard work. It didn't matter if Gym Master Xiao won or lost. The two exchanged glances a few times. They wanted to take the opportunity to discuss this topic, but they never expected that Gym Master Xiao would coincidentally stop at the beginning. He still spoke to Luo Nan. You said before that your grandfather left behind the 16 words formula. It's intricate and concise, and it's also a method of breathing and expelling. I've always been curious. Can you write it down for me to see? Okay. Luo Nan couldn't find a reason to refuse. He had just responded when Gym Master Xiao took a weasel bristle from the brush rack. He personally dipped it in ink and handed it to Luo Nan. Shuele changed the paper. Which youngster of today had ever practiced calligraphy? Even though the weasel bristle was tough and easy to write with, Luo Nan relied completely on his stable wrist techniques to forcefully draw. Though it wasn't to the point of staggering, it lacked the beauty of a turning point. He didn't even know how to use ink. The 16 words were either stiff like firewood or dull and sluggish. It was too horrible to look at. Gym Master Xiao didn't care. He straightened the writing on the xian paper and placed it before his eyes for a careful look. He didn't raise his head in the middle. He extended a hand and asked Luo Nan for the weasel bristle. He circled the fourth word of the second section. Then he wrote it again next to Luo Nan's ugly word. The word was Chapter 498. Gym Master Xiao raised his brush and wrote the word furnace. But when he opened his mouth, the first word he mentioned was prison. I'm guessing that the first word, prison, is perhaps the reason why you cultivate on the mental side. I'm not proficient in mental side cultivation, but I can feel that your soul's strength possesses an extraordinary binding power. It's never wrong to spend more effort in this direction when cultivating. Thank you for the pointers, Gym Master. Luo Nan was very impressed by the word, binding power, that Gym Master Xiao pointed out. This truly pointed out the typical characteristics of his soul strength. This was something he had been thinking about ever since he awakened yesterday. However, he had too many thoughts, so Gym Master Xiao's words were much clearer and more precise. Gym Master Xiao shook his head slightly. I'm just speaking thoughtlessly. After all, I'm still an outsider. You need to know what you're doing. However, I have to say that the word furnace is quite exquisite. He drew a circle around the word furnace in his own name. The original meaning of a furnace is an appliance used to store fire. It also has the meaning of smelting and cooking. When it comes to cultivation, there are many teachings on the foundation. It is also said to change the quality and nature, to refine the essence. This is the fundamental meaning that cultivators cannot avoid. He paused for a moment, then said softly, "This is also the starting point of the great path to heaven." Luo Nan and Shuelei looked at each other. Jim Master Xiao used to give lessons in the past. There was no lack of exaggerations within. Most of them were rhetorical expressions, so that they could remember them clearly. However, it seemed a bit abrupt to speak of the great path to heaven in plain language. Shuelei couldn't help but confirm. The great path to heaven? Jim Master Xiao tossed his brush into the brush washer and watched the ink spread a second time. It's the same furnace. Firewood stoves, coal stoves, steam engines, atomic furnaces, and fusion reactors are all different. Can't one reach the heavens by ascending these steps? Shuelei sweated a bit. If it's a reactor, what's the difference between the extraordinaries that your society speaks of and a nuclear reactor? How can a human be able to operate energy of such a level? Not to mention that these people are perpetually youthful, rejuvenated, have thoughts that span 10,000 miles, can pierce through the void, and so on. A mere reactor may not be able to catch up. Jim Master Xiao's hoarse voice somehow carried a sonorous tone. The present world is a flourishing age for cultivators. There are feasible, verifiable, and verifiable facts. This is enough to prove that there are no problems with our train of thought. There are no problems with our principles. There are just a few operational details. We just lack the operational details to realize them. We need time, energy, and the details need to be accumulated. Luo Nan stared at Jim Master Xiao in a daze as he listened to Jim Master Xiao speak. Luo Nan had a faint feeling that Jim Master Xiao's words were not imparting anything. Instead, Jim Master Xiao was narrating a fact that had already happened. The ink had melted, and the brush. Luo Master Brush
was
Master Brush. Jim Master Brush. Master's Brush Master. After awakening, the path of imparting martial arts has actually already reached the pinnacle. It's just that the natural environment has changed, and a portion of people can still rely on their innate talents and borrow the power of the world to take a step further. The current generation's research on burners hasn't raised the upper limit. It's just that the conditions for breaking through the barriers between heaven and man have been greatly relaxed. Of course, they're still researching and still making progress. As for the smaller number of so-called transcendents, they seem to have taken another step forward. However, if they were asked to explain clearly how they got out and what they should do next, perhaps more than half of the 10 would not know the truth, and there were even a few who did not know what to say. Everyone can speak the truth, but the details are the most terrifying barriers, causing people to break their heads and bleed. Haha, if there's really someone who's able to see through the profundities and subtleties within, then set up the steps for this path to ascend to the heavens and use it as a guide, then it'll naturally be boundless and incomparable. Just like the ancient Swerin or Prometheus who stole the heavenly fire. Haha. It had been a long time since he had spoken so much. Toward the end, Dojo Master Xiao was out of breath and coughed. His face was red, and even his neck was red. However, there was a smile within the coughing, a smile that caused Luo Nan and Shuelei to be both worried and perplexed. Luo Nan never imagined that there would be someone like Jim Master Xiao, who casually evaluated extraordinaries. Moreover, his words were filled with disdain. Disregarding everything else, just this arrogance was rare in this world, and it made people feel that his words were very reasonable. Luo Nan really wanted to hear more relevant information, but looking at Jim Master Xiao's state, the atomic furnace that had gone out of control within his body was becoming more and more intense. It actually had the potential to trigger an old problem. How could Luo Nan dare to trouble Jim Master Xiao? He gave Shuelei a meaningful glance, telling him to stay here and take care of Jim Master Xiao. Jim Master Xiao didn't urge Luo Nan to stay. He just said to Luo Nan after catching his breath, "You don't need to worry about these things right now. The time for your potential to naturally be unearthed has yet to pass." It's more realistic to ponder over some application methods. As for the matter of the furnace, it won't be too late to slowly research it after your potential has been fully unearthed and you can't find a path forward. Luo Nan mumbled his acknowledgement and immediately excused himself. Gym Master Xiao suddenly spoke just as he was about to leave the study. Did you guys take the dynamo core from the Tai Chi ball? Shui Lei was a bit embarrassed. He shot a glance at Luo Nan and said hurriedly, Yeah, I took it to repair. It's about to be fixed. Luo Nan shuddered. He turned his head to look at Gym Master Xiao. Gym Master, do you know that it's the dynamo core? Gym Master Xiao didn't give a direct answer. He just said, When I came back alone, I only brought this one souvenir. Since it's a souvenir, it doesn't matter if it's repaired or not. It was originally a defective product, just like us right now. Go get it. Us right now? Shui Lei gave Luo Nan a meaningful glance at this time, but Luo Nan didn't pay attention to it. His mind was surging with an endless tide. He used to believe that Gym Master Xiao was a great martial arts imparter hidden in the city. It was only today that he found out that Gym Master Xiao had a considerable understanding of the inner world, of burners, and even of a secret object like the dynamo core. Why was this so? Luo Nan didn't care about other things, but when it came to the dynamo core, this strange creation that was inextricably linked to his parents, it was impossible for him to ignore it. Luo Nan's thoughts were a mess, and he simply stood at the door in a daze. But at this time, his wristband received a call, waking him up. Gym Master Xiao saw this and indicated that he could leave. Gym Master Xiao looked down at the ugly character Luo Nan had written. He had no intention of speaking. Luo Nan was conflicted for a moment, but in the end, his respect for Gym Master Xiao prevailed. He slowly turned around. At the same time, he lowered his head to look at the caller ID. It was Xie Junping. Luo Nan was just about to answer when he suddenly heard a voice. Luo Nan. Gym Master Xiao rarely called Luo Nan by his name ever since they met. Luo Nan was stunned for a moment. He hurriedly ended the call and turned around. Gym Master Xiao didn't even raise his head. He spoke in a dull voice. You have a good grandfather. He opened up a vast space for you. You can't let him down. Yes. Thank you, Gym Master. Gym Master Xiao really didn't speak anymore. He just stood there like a statue carved from withered wood. Shui Lei remained in the apartment, observing Gym Master Xiao's state. Luo Nan went out alone. He was still a bit absent-minded when Xie Junping called him again. Where are you? Why aren't you picking up? I just left the Gym Master's house. Oh, you're cultivating. Then you're still in the Riverwu district. You haven't forgotten what day it is today, have you? I remember. Isn't your initiation ceremony at night? What time is it right now? Hehe. Are you driving? I'm driving. Xie Junping's tone told Luo Nan that it wasn't a good thing. But Luo Nan had bodyguards following him at all times. He had just left the house, and Qin Ikuan was already following him. It would undoubtedly be the worst joke to say that he didn't drive. Driving is fine. I'll let you run some errands. We have a particularly lively kid here, Diweiwu. You know his adoptive father. Hello? Hello. What's wrong? Did the signal get cut off? No, I'm listening. Luo Nan was just a bit stupefied by the coincidence. They were just talking about the dynamo core, and now Xie Junping was suddenly talking about a person closely related to it. Was Xia City evil? Di Weiwu's adoptive father. Yes, Worker Zhai. I know. Xie Junping coughed. It's very simple. Worker Zhai will be attending the ceremony tonight, but he's working overtime on the weekend, so he can't come. Since you guys know each other, you might as well bring him back along the way. Bringing him back isn't a problem, but this can't be considered along the way. Worker Zhai's cross-border electronic city was located in the Xiqing district. Xie Junping's initiation ceremony was held in the Forest Wall district's orphanage, and the Riverwu district just happened to be in between. If Luo Nan wanted to bring someone along, he would first have to walk back. If this could be considered along the way, then what about around the corner? Xie Junping continued to chuckle. I understand. It's just that Worker Zhai is too busy today. That kid Weiwu came up with a rotten idea. He wants you to go and get a high-level account. Go out into the field and pull his father out. I'll pay for the middle fees. That's right. However, Luo Nan felt that this was more like the will of heaven. Luo Nan and his party arrived at the cross-border electronic city approximately 20 minutes later. It was the weekend, and this place was quite crowded. Business was bursting. While Luo Nan was in the car, he had already asked for the exclusive service of a designated maintenance technician. When he entered the maintenance hall, worker Zhai, who was busy at the open maintenance platform, immediately received the news. He raised his head and gazed into the distance. He saw Luo Nan and the others and made a "wait a moment" gesture through the air. Soon, a beautiful maintenance consultant walked over with quick steps. "Hello, Mr. Luo. Your exclusive service has been accepted. Worker Zhai still has some unfinished work to do. He invites you to wait a moment in the independent maintenance room." Luo Nan was already a frequent customer of the cross-border electronic city, and he had been looking for worker Zhai all this time. The maintenance consultant had long since memorized Luo Nan's appearance. Her smile was like a flower. Luo Nan made an okay gesture toward the open maintenance platform and followed the maintenance consultant into maintenance room 245. Qin Ikuan accompanied him by his side, and God stood guard outside. Ever since Luo Nan began learning engineering and mechanical design from worker Zhai, he had come to this worker Zhai's exclusive maintenance room more than once. He had personally operated many of the equipment inside. In this room, he possessed authority second only to the super administrator of the electronic city and worker Zhai. Though the space was cramped, it was very intimate. After entering, he took the initiative to be the host. He opened the beverage box and delivered purified water to Qin Ikuan and God, who stood outside the door. Then it was time to wait. Luo Nan was never afraid of having nothing to do here. He still had a few unfinished practical assignments assigned by worker Zhai. There was even a semi-finished chip that worker Zhai had left behind. However, Luo Nan had come today not only to complete Xie Juanping's request, but he also had an even more pressing matter to deal with. Chapter 499. Luo Nan sat cross-legged in the center of the spacious hall. He sensed that there was an enormous space of over 10,000 square meters without any support. It was completely transparent. Surrounding him were slowly rotating structural diagrams. Concise lines and symbols were used to indicate the internal structure and function of the machine, as well as the relationship between the various components. This spacious area was a virtual space set up on the psychic wave network through the hexayear. Aside from the form that could be seen and felt, a portion of the supercomputing resources of the Xia City branch was borrowed to conduct a certain scale of analysis and calculation. There was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. This computing space was charged based on the amount of supercomputing resources borrowed. The payment was extremely precious honor points. However, these minor details were no longer within the scope of Luo Nan's consideration. What he paid the most attention to right now was the tens of thousands of blueprints floating and rotating. A month ago, Luo Nan would have thought that these mechanical schematics were like a heavenly book. But now, they were completely devoid of any sense of jerkiness. This was not only because of his previous hard work, but also because of his large weight, high-intensity recognition and understanding in a short period of time. These blueprints had a total of 2 sources. One source came from the process of worker Zhai repairing the Tai Chi ball dynamo core over the past month. Worker Zhai combed through the dynamic structure and restored a portion that represented the possible direction of function. The second source was a bit further. It came from the spoils of war obtained from killing Jack during the conflict with Quantum Corporation. It was the Deep Sea Type 4 dynamo core. This item was originally going to be auctioned, but Xia City took note of its uniqueness and intercepted it. The branch never relaxed in their research during these 2 months. Some of the research methods they adopted overlapped with worker Zhai's, so at least 2/3 of the blueprints were quite similar. Without a doubt, there was a fee for borrowing and reading this information. According to Luo Nan's understanding, the overlapped blueprints belonged to the functional structure of over 1,000 threads of varying thickness after the 3-layer structure of the dynamo core was fully unfolded. However, There were some special scenes within the deep-sea Type 4 dynamo core that Worker Zhai was unable to comprehend at his level. These were the parts that involved the mutual interference between the mental and the material. From Luo Nan's current understanding, this included a portion of the Tower of Babel and Mount Buzhou. This was the core configuration that broke the barrier between the mental and the material. There was also a portion that involved a special structure that covered both the mental and material planes. When the deep-sea Type 4 dynamo core was fully unfolded, there were some parts that could be felt, known, and measured on the material plane. There were also some parts that were built upon the foundation of the Tower of Babel and Mount Buzhou. This was something that scientific instruments could not detect. In terms of grade, the deep-sea Type 4 should be at least one grade higher than the Tai Chi Ball dynamo core. But then again, Worker Zhai's research was limited by his cultivation. It was difficult for him to detect more details in terms of mental and material interference, so he had to take this into consideration. Unfortunately, Luo Nan didn't have the physical deep-sea Type 4 dynamo core with him. He was unable to conduct field tests, so he could only use his memories from 2 months ago as a comparison. But 2 months ago, his insight and knowledge couldn't be compared to now, so there was still a lot of blank space to fill in. Also, of Luo Nan could not keep the Luo. Luo Nan opened his eyes. He held the plastic bag between his index and middle fingers, holding the dynamo core before his eyes. Under the illumination of the iron cover, a mysterious luster flowed on the regular rhombohedron, attracting his soul. Machine.
Under in. By.
Under the metal, and the regular the that, under, as under. The ceremony was very simple. There was nothing mysterious about it. As the protagonists, Xie Junping and Du Yong submitted their homework under the witness of the nannies, children, and some religious residents in the orphanage. Then, they were verified by Dean Vanta, the mentor of the order, and they were granted the identity of abstinence bearers in the order. President Wan Ta, on the other hand, announced the end of the ceremony after briefly explaining the concepts of material nature and order. Luo Nan even felt that Dean Wan Ta wanted to use this opportunity to let the children of the orphanage enjoy a delicious meal prepared by a certain hedonist of Xia City. As for Xie Junping and Du Yong, they were quite satisfied. They had experienced enough of the most powerful mysterious elements in the test before they officially joined the church, and they had also achieved tangible results. Mysterious plus effective equals devout. This formula was applicable in the vast majority of circumstances. More importantly, it was fine as long as everyone was happy. The ceremony and banquet were very casual. Luo Nan had more private time. He felt that there were too many children at the banquet in the main hall. It was quite noisy, so he walked around the other rooms of the orphanage. Luo Nan had always admired Dean Wan Ta's skillful hands and design philosophy. The orphanage, which had been converted from an abandoned shopping mall, truly had a style to it. It had a sense of artistic order. The place he was in right now was the reception room he had stayed in last time. He reclined on an old peach-colored sofa. The clamor outside had dropped to a relatively comfortable level, bringing a marvelous sense of tranquility. So Luo Nan spent half an hour here to apply for computing space and to compare and ponder. There was no one to disturb him. It was very comfortable. However, this feeling of comfort inevitably subsided when he faced the dynamo core. He would have to return this little thing to Gym Master Xiao by tomorrow at the latest. Even though he had already left behind a complete blueprint, it would be too easy to think of the dynamo core as a toy to obtain results through a simple comparison of the blueprint. Luo Nan sighed in his mind. He rubbed his fingers and opened the bag. There were no other movements after that. The dynamo core in the bag floated up by itself. It passed through the opening of the bag and floated to a more spacious area outside. Buzz. A deep vibrating sound entered Luo Nan's ears. The dynamo core floating in the air first extended out 6 tentacles. Then the tentacles branched off one by one, forming 30 secondary branches. And on a level that was hard to discern with the naked eye, there were 1,240 even finer filaments. They constructed a complex and dense network that was distributed within an area of a meter in diameter. Luo Nan's thoughts turned once more. His soul strength and the material plane interfered with each other, forming nearly incorporeal waves that swept through the area. The changes in its structure were absorbed into his heart lake. It was just as the mechanical schematic showed. The complex structure was undergoing changes all the time. There was practically no good way to confirm its functions one by one, aside from a supercomputer. Fortunately, Luo Nan never hoped that he could decipher the ultimate mysteries of the dynamo core in a short amount of time. Otherwise, he would be looking down on the research capabilities of the entire Earth's academic community. He just used this to dispel the last bit of his unrealistic fantasies. Then he concentrated his energy to search for a certain sign. A defective product. Just like us right now. A defective product. Us right now. Luo Nan cared a lot about Jim Mastershio's words because it involved his parents and loved ones, and because of the context and wording. From Luo Nan's perspective, Jim Mastershio's words didn't clearly point out anything, and he didn't clearly link them together. However, the meaning was consistent. The main thrust of their discussion was the outline of human cultivation, and then they focused on the concept of the furnace. Jim Mastershio's words and his own situation pointed out without a doubt that the current world had yet to obtain a reasonable and complete result regarding the construction method of the furnace. This included the extraordinaries who stood at the apex. Following this logic, Jim Mastershio mentioned the dynamo core, calling it a defective product. More importantly, there was the word us in his words. In light of this, Luo Nan could only believe that Jim Mastershio had made an analogy between the dynamo core and the ability users of the current world. At the very least, they were cultivators who touched upon the concept of the furnace. The dynamo core was a defective product. Ability users were also defective products. The defective products of ability users were due to the incomplete construction of the furnace. Then was the defect of the corresponding dynamo core also due to the defect in the structure of the furnace? Also, the defect was relative to the completeness. Where was the complete reference? Luo Nan observed the structure of the dynamo core from many angles, but how could he see through the mysteries within such a short time? As he was observing carefully, he sensed someone coming from outside. He was just about to put away the dynamo core, but a thought flashed through his mind, and he didn't take the next step. A rhythmic knock sounded on the door, and Luo Nan said, "Please come in." The door to the reception room opened, and Dean Wanta, who wore a priest-like robe, walked in with slow steps. After entering the room, his gaze naturally fell on the structure of the dynamo core floating in the air. "Dean Wan, you've worked hard." "It's nothing. The children were just a bit noisy. They didn't disturb you, right?"
No.
This really is a good place to find tranquility amidst the noise. It's quite suitable to think about problems. Nurse Wang even poured me some water. The two exchanged a few words of greeting, and Luo Nan gestured with his hand, inviting Wanta to sit wherever he wanted. Wanta sat on a recliner of the same color across from the sofa, his body naturally straight. One of them was so polite that it didn't seem like he was in his own territory, while the other was as casual and natural as if he was at home. It was a bit like the host and the guest had been reversed. However, both sides weren't people who paid much attention to superfluous formalities. They did things according to their hearts, and they displayed considerable respect. Wanta respected Luo Nan's privacy, and Luo Nan didn't keep it to himself. Instead, he completely presented the structure of the dynamo core in front of Wanta. This kind of magnanimity continued from the first time the two met. This was because they knew that the other belonged to the lawful faction, and the scope of maintaining order was different. Even if they weren't completely like-minded, there was no direct conflict of ideals. More importantly, they both hoped to carry forward their own ideals, to let more people recognize them, and to use them in a broader domain. Therefore, they could accept each other's teachings, and they could compare notes with each other. Luo Nan preserved the structure of the dynamo core because he wanted Wanta to give him some advice. "What's this?" "It's a headache. I hope Dean Wan can give me some advice." "Okay, let me take a look." Wanta didn't put on a false front. He didn't waste words after taking a seat. Matter waves radiated from his body, covering the region where the structure of the dynamo core was located. Luo Nan believed that Wonton needed to observe for a period of time, but he clearly didn't understand the habitual thinking patterns of this instructor of the Order of Creators. Chapter 500. The size of the water droplet was similar to that of the Tai Chi dynamo core. After it floated in the air, it began to fine-tune its outline. Under the illumination of the light, it revealed an eye-catching prismatic light, turning into a standard rhombohedron. The cross-section reflection and the effect of water waves made it look like both a bright diamond and a warm pearl, very attractive. The illusory reflected light was not within the scope of Luo Nan's attention, but he kept staring at the changes in the water droplet's shape. He looked at how the water droplet, which seemed to have no strength at all, drew its outline out of thin air until it was completely identical to the shape of the Tai Chi ball dynamo core. Was this the myriad pagoda's method of creation? Before Luo Nan could truly analyze it clearly, he saw an even more magnificent magical scene in the next 2 seconds. In an instant, the water was full of light. Thousands of illusory filaments bloomed, vaguely reflecting the light like a cluster of translucent flowers. As the structure entered a stable state, the wonder disappeared as soon as it appeared. Luo Nan subconsciously sucked in a breath. Oh, sorry, it's still a little short. Wonton clenched his fist, and the water threads that had already dispersed instantly retracted, returning to their original water droplet form. He looked at the structure of the dynamo core, thought for a moment, and asked, "Open the 3 layers one by one, right?" Luo Nan went, "Oh," and nodded. Then he came to a realization. His interference power changed, causing the dynamo core's fully expanded structure to recover, returning it to its original shape. Then he stimulated and opened it again. Wonton observed it carefully and was a little surprised. There is almost no change in the volume. This thing is made of a special material. Maybe there is a change in its physical properties when it is folded. As he spoke, the water droplets were like the dynamo core, spreading out layer by layer. They no longer bloomed instantaneously like in the beginning, and the sensory stimulation was somewhat less. However, the inconceivable shaping and control power within was even more admirable. In a certain sense, Luo Nan could use interference power to construct fine structures, just like the condensation ring. Of course, he could also play with water. He had the soul cloak mode. Through the condensation ring, his divine will could fully interfere with the material plane. He could build a picture of the deep sea and even a wonderful space where water molecules were concentrated. But this method was used at the boundary between the mind and the material, between the virtual and the real. It couldn't be compared to the 10,000 pagodas creation technique, which embodied everything on a purely physical level. Luo Nan already felt that Wonton's methods were miraculous, but Wonton still felt that it wasn't perfect. He gathered the water droplets again, and then reshaped them, as if he would never get tired of it. Luo Nan didn't tire of this process. His eyes stared fixedly at the sparkling and translucent model. This wasn't just a model. Luo Nan could feel that when the Wonton tower exerted force to maintain its form, this toy should be able to display similar functions to the dynamo core. Luo Nan sucked in another breath. He suddenly spoke a sentence. "Can you teach me?" Wonton didn't say anything. He just shot a glance at Luo Nan, nodded, and continued with his operation. Luo Nan didn't say anything more. He focused his mind and watched as the body of water blossomed like a flower, more and more perfectly imitating the structure of the Tai Chi ball dynamo core. The tentacles, secondary branches, and filaments split and expanded layer by layer, forming 3 relatively clear areas. It was more or less the same as when he first saw this scene. Luo Nan couldn't help but think of an essential factor: formatting theory. From the very beginning, Grandpa's formatting theory had deduced the visualization diagram, the structure of a tetrahedron with inscribed and circumscribed spheres. Luo Nan had already confirmed that this structure was closely related to the dynamo core. Whether it was the deep sea type 4 dynamo core, The dynamic structure of the Tai Chi Ball dynamo core, or Jack's memories of the moment he transformed from an altered human to a burner, all of them clearly displayed this point. Luo Nen even guessed that the scientists researching the archetype format should have grasped this key point. For instance, the epoch-making inventions like the burner and the format of fire. It was very likely that they had some reference. What about Grandpa? Where did his research originate from? At this moment, Luo Nen couldn't help but think of the external neuron coiled in his brain. That was also a dynamo core. Whether it was Luo Nan's emotional delineation or reality verification, both proved that this dynamo core was of a higher level than the other two dynamo cores he had seen. It was much higher level. At least from the current research materials, the other two dynamo cores didn't possess the function of hollow depository. They couldn't form the subtle configuration of the condensation ring, and they couldn't serve as the key to the building of gear that led to the clouds. But the focus of the current problem lay in the furnace body. If the dynamo core could be viewed as a mechanical system when combined with the visualization diagram, this was precisely the direction of Worker Zhai's research. Then, a mechanical system should have three basic parts: the motion department, the transmission department, and the work department. The motion department was most likely the location of the furnace that Jim Master Shio spoke of. Luo Nan didn't expect to find a complete power source from the dynamo core. It didn't conform to the law of conservation of energy if it relied purely on the dynamo core to generate energy. Even a reactor needed to add nuclear fuel rods. The powerful power possessed by cultivators was produced through the human body's absorption of food and other resources. A higher level could be explained as the mutual interference between the mind and matter, drawing special energy from other dimensions. From this point of view, the truth of the so-called furnace should be the integration and utilization of external resources. On this point, all three dynamo cores had shown their worth. The Tai Chi Ball dynamo core absorbed external force. The Deep Sea Type 4 dynamo core absorbed the energy of the Deep Blue Walker's energy storage when Jack controlled it. The external neuron displayed its astonishing ability first, drawing electricity from the energy center of gear. Of course, they all went through a transformation process. Luo Nan hadn't been electrocuted to death by the high-voltage electricity. Jim Master Shio had also said things like, upgrade step by step. Therefore, the standard of a furnace should be to convert external resources into a higher form of energy to achieve efficient utilization. Which one is more efficient? The Tai Chi Ball dynamo core could carry a metal ball that weighed several hundred kilograms by storing and transforming the external force of a strike. The Deep Sea Type 4 dynamo core allowed a cyborg like Jack to generate the format of fire and break through the barrier between the spirit and the material. As for the external neuron, it was even more inconceivable. It opened up a void chamber that could accommodate soul power, and it could change its form at any time to serve as a medium for the interaction between the spirit and the material. Of course, there was a difference in abilities. If Luo Nan were to rank them, the external neuron would undoubtedly be ranked first, the Deep Sea Type 4 dynamo core would be ranked second, and the Tai Chi Ball dynamo core would be ranked last. But there were far too many details that Luo Nan was unable to make clear of. He was unable to draw the conclusion that this was a defective product. If he could complete the three dynamo core models and make a direct comparison, he might be able to find out where the differences and flaws were. This was the reason why Luo Nan wanted to learn the Wan-Ta method of creation. Defective product. There had to be a reason. A moment later, Luo Nan flipped open his notebook and lit up the flexible e-ink screen. His gaze rested on a dark gray app icon on the main interface. This icon was in the shape of a tetrahedron with an inscribed circumscribed circle. It was the classic visualization diagram of formatting theory. Right now, it was displayed as an incomplete download. The icon appeared at the end of September, after his confrontation with the human-faced arachnid at the Limestone Water Village pub. It represented his progress in analyzing the Wraith sign, or the order framework behind it. Sometimes, it also represented the progress of his cultivation. However, ever since the incident at Frost River Reality, the progress of the icon's analysis had been stuck at the subtle number of 99%. It had remained stagnant. Even though Luo Nan's cultivation had made tremendous progress during this period of time, his level of understanding had continuously increased, and his development of the Wraith Sign's abilities continued to deepen. The icon still had no reaction. If Luo Nan were to consider things from his previous perspective, he could only believe that his understanding of the Wraith Sign and the order framework involved in formatting theory had not made any fundamental breakthroughs. But now, he could not help but consider things from a different perspective. Was there a problem with the dynamo core itself? Luo Nan grew more and more impatient to learn the method of creation. However, the most important thing was to discuss the mysteries of the dynamo core's structure. As the water bead's mimicry gradually approached perfection, Luo Nan and Wan Ta began a corresponding discussion. Differences and arguments were unavoidable when it came to the details. We must consider the factor of materiality. The structure is the most crucial. Forgive me for speaking bluntly. You are running away from an unfamiliar domain. But I feel that we must first find the right entry point. And Dean Wan, I believe that it is a bit biased to be completely bound to the material plane. The voices of the two grew louder and louder. The corresponding domain expanded, involving even more issues of philosophy. It could not be said that their faces were red and their necks were thick, but it was definitely not as harmonious as it was in the beginning. At this time, there was another knock on the door to the reception room. Little featherhead Di Weiwu poked his head in from outside the door. His eyes widened. Are you guys going to fight? The discussion was forced to stop. Luo Nan and Wanta looked at each other and shook their heads at the same time.
No.
There's no such thing. Di Weiwu pushed open the door completely. He curled his lips and said, I feel like it. Brother Luo Nan, I know that your abilities are great and that you can fight super well. But we aren't weak here. The child could clearly distinguish between inside and outside. And though his words were casual, Luo Nan and Wanta discovered his nervous mood. It looked like he was really worried. Were they arguing very intensely before? It was likely that the discussion would not succeed today. Luo Nan smiled at Wanta and put away the dynamo core. He was just about to pacify the child when a directional message came over from the Hexayear. The Society's guardian target, Sleeping Beauty, has gone missing. Please confirm and assist in the search. Ha! Luo Nan had yet to completely understand what was going on when another call came in. The caller was He Wen. Mr. Luo, Rui Wen has gone missing. She disappeared from the intensive care unit 2 minutes ago. Disappeared? Rui Wen? Luo Nan's brain was a bit unable to react. Isn't her disappearance very?
Huh.
Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. It must be said that Rui Wen was the freest star in his closed system. Even if she was lying in a hospital bed, her physical position was clear. She would appear and disappear in the projection of the format pyramid and the living starry sky. She would suddenly disappear for a period of time. She was uncontrollable. This was a situation from the beginning.
He was used to it.
Chapter 501. Rui Wen's sudden disappearance caused the Xia City branch to be thrown into chaos. After all, there were many complicated issues involved aside from finding the person. A new mission channel had been established on the Psychic Wave Network. Fire, theft, Quantum Corporation, and perhaps headquarters as well. In a short amount of time, most of Xia City had been mobilized. It was a chaotic mess. Luo Nan could only leave the orphanage in a hurry after this happened. Before he left, he gave the Tai Chi Ball dynamo core in his hand to Shuele, who was also attending the ceremony. He asked Shuele to return it to Gym Master Xiao for now. Then he took a car to Shanding Building to observe the situation. Luo Nan's thoughts were still unclear after he got in the car, but his emotions were still calm. He activated the resources of the sealed system to try and lock onto a target while he looked at the video He Wen sent him. The video was a surveillance record of Rui Wen's ward. The time shown was around 2040, approximately 5 minutes ago. At the beginning, the girl was lying peacefully on the hospital bed. There were a few monitoring and life support equipment on her body. Everything looked normal. But several seconds later, the slender girl's eyelashes trembled in the focal area of the surveillance video. Then she opened her eyes. The image was extremely clear, but Luo Nan's mood was a bit absent-minded at this moment. The girl's gaze looked straight at the ceiling. She was serene and calm, not revealing any emotions. She didn't look like the emptiness and bewilderment of someone who had been bedridden for a long time. Instead, she seemed to be extremely clear about her own circumstances. This scene made Luo Nan's heart inexplicably oppressed. This was a person he had personally saved. She was half a believer, but he couldn't say that he was familiar with her. Seriously, who else in this world knew of Rue Wen's true origins besides the laboratory of Quantum Corporation? Perhaps she was already used to similar situations? Luo Nan still remembered that when he faced Gong Qi, who had invaded the cloud world, only Rue Wen had given him a resonance in the entire sealed system when he was agitated and angry. It wasn't a resonance. It was a resonance that was true and void. She seemed calm on the surface, but there was an oppressive and flowing feeling of blazing heat. It perfectly matched Luo Nan's state of mind at the time. Was it an accidental coordination, or was it because of a similar experience? Luo Nan couldn't get an answer, but the emotions in his heart continued to ripple because of those serene eyes. He stared at the image, a bit stunned. At this time, from the surveillance screen, it could be seen that because of Rue Wen's sudden awakening, the inside and outside of the monitoring room were also in a mess. Some medical staff opened the door and came in, wanting to do a further examination. It was conceivable that there would be more people rushing over from the outside. At this moment, the originally clear image suddenly blurred. In reality, it wasn't that the image was blurred, but the reality it reflected was blurred. On the sickbed, Rue Wen was like an illusory bubble. She flashed in the middle of the distorted light and shadow, then disappeared without a trace. In just a tenth of a second, the hospital bed became empty. All the tubes were loosened, and the nutrient solution dripped onto the bedding. There were still traces of a human figure pressing down on the bedding. Such a way of disappearing? Luo Nan was a bit stupefied for a time. He hurriedly rewound the surveillance video to watch. The second time, he felt a little more confident. His body and soul fused into one. This was precisely Rue Wen's forte. She was a special existence that wandered the boundary between the spiritual and the material. At that moment, she was completely an incorporeal spirit. Naturally, she could leave as she pleased. If she could leap into the deep spiritual plane of the Abyss region and the polar domain, even President Ouyang would have a hard time keeping her here. It was easy to say, but the more Luo Nan understood the know-how within, the more he felt that Rue Wen's actions had already completely exceeded the scope of the ordinary concept of supernatural power. The mutual interference of the material and the mental was understandable, but a complete transformation. How in the world did she accomplish this? Luo Nan didn't invest too much energy into this question. In any case, it was impossible for him to figure it out in a short amount of time. Compared to these technical matters, he was more concerned about Rue Wen's current thoughts. Why did this experimental girl, who resonated with a corner of his mind, leave? Where did she want to go? What sort of attitude did she have toward these people, especially him? He sat in the back of the off-road vehicle. His hands were pressed together in front of his mouth and nose, concealing his facial expression. He was even more focused, paying attention to the changes in the living starry sky at all times. Where was she? Where was she? The vehicle had already entered Xiqing district. It made an oblique turn, heading toward the Lilan district. But then Luo Nan suddenly stood up. Wait a moment. Let's go order some wine. Beside him, Qin Yikuan turned his head in astonishment. Which one? Luo Nan's eyes seemed to be closed, but his other perspective within the living starry sky became clearer and clearer. Correspondingly, the resplendent stars shifted their positions, bringing slight ripples to the closed system. Linhai District, Huaying West Road, Dingyang Bar. Hurry up. God borrowed the rear view mirror to glance over. He swung the steering wheel lightly, and the vehicle left autopilot mode. It turned onto another magnetic rail highway, and its speed suddenly increased. Emoya walked out from the back door of the bar. She used a wet towel with makeup remover to wipe off the makeup on her face. There was a wind gap in the back alley. The fine snow powder was like flying knives, whizzing as it struck her face. Emoya felt that this kind of weather was quite refreshing. But her companions in front of her had already shrunk their necks and were fighting to be the first to board the nanny van. Behind her, the new trainee agent cum star scout, Meng Fei, had long since taken precautions. She wore thick winter clothes that were simply prepared for trekking in the wilderness. But when she put it on her body, her originally stocky body became even rounder. She really didn't have half the graceful bearing of a business elite. However, she had come to learn from Luo Nan and to freeload a meal. She hadn't officially started working yet, so there was no way to use business etiquette to restrain her. Then she looked at the real agent, Mr. Haijing. He was dressed like a man. He wore a coarse trench coat with a dark red scarf. It was very fashionable, and his calm and unhurried posture with his hands in his pockets could even make young girls scream. He was more famous than a star, and he beat up the few disappointing third-rate rock and roll practitioners in front of him. Mountain Creek, which had already begun to be commercialized, spent less and less time in various bars and nightclubs. Most of their performances were friendly performances to repay their previous debts in the underground circle. At the same time, it also further fermented the results of the performance in the municipal square last month. The current situation could only be said to be lukewarm. Every day, they would increase the number of pre-sales for their debut album by a few numbers. That was all. Emoya wiped off the foundation, blush, and the like, and threw the wet towel into the trash can on the side. She had already calculated it, but she didn't expect a sudden gust of wind to blow. The wet towel hit the entrance, hung, and fell out. Tisk, so unstylish. If the paparazzi bumped into her, she would be the legendary third-rate female star who casually threw trash. She had no sense of civility. She could get a place on the gossip forums. But she didn't need to fix it now. A strange sound rang out. The cleaning robot that was lying in ambush in a certain corner of the back alley was stimulated. It started up from its standby state and slowly drove over, shoveling away the wet towel. Good lad, much better than my two younger brothers. When the robot passed by, Emoya patted its silly, black, and thick head. It's up to you to decide. Do you want to go home or go to your nest today? Choose A and bark. Choose B and be silent. The robot slid over expressionlessly. Okay, choose B.
Huh?
The corner where the cleaning robot had stayed before, which was also the place where junk was placed in the alley, rang with the flapping of wings. It sounded like a bird was struggling. Soon, the sound of scrape was clear. It was a crow that was commonly seen in Xia City. Was it looking for food? There have been more crows in Xia City recently. Emoya felt that she would always encounter similar situations when she went out recently. Crows would fly over her head and around her from time to time. Fortunately, her luck wasn't affected. Haijing also glanced in that direction. It's hard to see other birds in winter besides crows and sparrows. Unless you go to the ecological park. Do you want to take a walk tomorrow? Tomorrow's agenda is to sleep late. You can ask Sister Meng to treat you.
Treat it as a bribe.
Say more good things in front of the boss in the future. Then forget it. One sentence from Sister Wei is worth 100 sentences from me. The return on investment is obviously not equal. Meng Fei directly flipped the hood of her winter suit over her head. She completely curled into a ball. In this damn weather, I'd rather go to the streets to do my homework than go to some ecological park. At least I can go to the mall to get some heat. Then I hope that you can discover another Sister Wei. Thank you for your blessings. In just a few sentences, the topic had been changed to who knows where. At this time, Malu stuck his head out of the car and urged them to get on. The group of people chatted and laughed as they got on the car. When they were about to get on the car, the cleaning robot had just returned to its original position. The car's lights were turned on, stretching its shadow diagonally forward. Emoya blew the guy a kiss.
Thanks.
Scrape? It was the crow dubbing. Emoya laughed and was about to get into the car when she suddenly shivered.
Wait.
She called out and jumped out of the car again. In the car, Shui, who still had a date, was a little annoyed. Are you done? Emoya didn't care at all. She strode forward with her long legs and arrived in front of the car in 2 steps. At this time, the headlights were pointing forward. The snow flew everywhere and reflected a distorted shadow inside the alley. In this long, twisted, chaotic shadow, Moya saw the shadows of the cleaning robot and the junk pile mixed together. At the edge of them, there was a long swaying shadow. The edges were uneven, and the bottom was slightly curved. It should be the wings of a crow flapping, and there was also half of its body. But below the long shadow, there was a slender shadow. The front part of the shadow merged with the crow's shadow, but the shape of the bent joints could be vaguely seen. And then there was an even more obvious curve of the wrist and the straight line of the arm. Haijing also got out of the car and stood side by side with Emoya. He squinted his eyes and tilted his head slightly. At this moment, he could clearly see that under the illumination of the headlights, there was clearly a slender arm of light supporting the crow. Under the fluttering snow powder, it was trembling slightly. His heart trembled. Emoya had already rushed forward and went straight to the junk pile. Haijing stretched out his hand, but didn't even catch the tail of his shirt. A second later, Emoya's shout filled the alley. Chapter 5:02. Long Chi came out of the nightclub wearing a thin cashmere sweater with a high collar. Even with the casual suit hanging on his arm, his clothes were a season different from the others. But this kind of tight-fitting style was also very powerful, showing off a superior and fit figure. The young woman who went out with him wished that she could turn into a warm jacket and stick close to him, creating a short and exciting memory together. However, regardless of whether Long Chi was facing the snowflakes that filled the sky or the young married woman who had tears in her eyes, he was still smiling. He refused the young woman's invitation, but left his social contact number. Then, he walked into the cold wind without looking back. The low temperature of -20 degrees Celsius was meaningless to him, just like the restless woman whose body temperature was about to rise to 40 degrees Celsius. At 9:00 in the evening, the nightclub street in the waterfront district had not yet entered its most lively period. He really liked the atmosphere here, but it was a pity that the last-minute mission had brought him some destructive expectations. Walking along the nightclub street for a few hundred meters, he found the designated area with the help of the dazzling red and blue police lights. It was the back alley of a music bar. Looking from here, under the streetlights, the alley was surrounded by a dense group of people. He leisurely walked over. However, just as he stepped into the front of the alley, a throbbing thought suddenly dripped into the lake of his heart. With a dripping sound, a dense chill spread out layer by layer. In the blink of an eye, it spread throughout his entire body. Long Chi shuddered and stopped abruptly. This was something that even a temperature of -20 degrees Celsius could not do. Little guy, don't be nervous. Let big sister take a look. In the alley, Emoya took the risk of being hit by the crow's wings. She crouched down and got closer to the child. The child is thin. This was Emoya's first impression. The child was wearing a loose hospital gown. His hair had probably not been taken care of for 2 to 3 months. It hung over his forehead and covered half of his face. Under the shadow of the pile of junk, the crows and the onlookers, the fragments of light that shone and made his face appear even thinner and paler. It was inevitable that he looked a little gloomy. This made the child appear a bit more mature. But with Luo Nan as a reference, his actual age should be about the same. Maybe a bit younger. 14, 15? Emoya tried to confirm if the child had any identification, such as a bracelet on him. Under normal circumstances, in order to make it easier to live in this society, even children who were completely incapacitated would wear identification cards and the like. But after looking around twice, Emoya did not find any similar equipment. But what was the meaning of the hospital gown? In his memory, there was no hospital nearby. The child sitting next to the pile of junk indeed had no intention of moving. He just stared at the crow in his hand. This crow's body was extremely large, much larger than its peers. At this moment, it tilted its head and looked back at the child. Occasionally, it would flap its wings and caw. There seemed to be a hint of helplessness in its voice. In fact, ever since the sudden appearance of this fellow believer, the crow named Ink had not flown for almost half an hour. Ink would not let go of him. Emoya was a little uncertain. She scratched her head and turned around, only to be shocked. Unbeknownst to him, a dense crowd of people had gathered behind him. The members of the Mountain Creek Band, the bar owner who had heard the news, the customers, and a bunch of idlers who had come out to watch the commotion had completely blocked the narrow alley. The policemen who had just arrived were struggling to squeeze in. "The police are here. Everyone get out of the way." Emoya gestured for her manager to chase them away. She suspected that the skinny child in front of her might have some mental illness. This was because the child's expression and attitude did not match a normal situation. There was clearly a circle of people watching, but the child did not speak, did not move, did not care, and did not care. He only gently stroked the crow's feathers in his hand and muttered something incomprehensible. Autism? Schizophrenia? Or something else? Forgive her for thinking this way. There was no helping it. There was an old person in the family who was like this, so Emoya was more sensitive. She was worried that if too many people gathered, it would cause adverse effects. Haijing displayed the responsibility and means of a manager. With just a few words, he got the police to help him chase most of the onlookers back to the bar. At the same time, the other members of the Mountain Creek Band, who could not stand the cold temperature in the back alley, hurriedly got into the car and left under the supervision of Meng Jia. Only Emoya and himself were left. Things were considered normal up to this point, but then things came to a standstill. The little guy sitting in the corner must be mentally different from ordinary people. He didn't speak or move. The people around him, no matter how they tried to persuade him or coax or hug him, couldn't pull him out of the corner. In the end, all they got was the dissatisfied caw of the crow. That was awkward. The police officer was still a young man, and he really wanted to kneel down. This child is too stubborn. The problem is that there is no information in the system, not in the SCA's database. There are no records of a child being admitted to any hospital, welfare home, or nursing home in the city. Why do I feel like this is a major case? I've also notified the SCA Child Welfare Department. Maybe there are specializations? It's just that it's too. Achoo. During the persuasion, Haijing had already taken off his windbreaker, wanting to give it to the child to keep him warm. However, the child did not appreciate it at all. The crow flapping its wings was also a hindrance. Haijing was too embarrassed to put it back on, so he only draped it over his back and stomped his feet in the cold in the alley. If the situation was not resolved soon, he might be sent to the hospital with a bad cold. But he was most worried about Emoya right now. This beautiful woman, who was highly radiant and cold, thought that she could resist the cold. The clothes she was wearing were just that, so she must have been badly frozen. There was a commercial show in 2 days, and it would be troublesome if something went wrong. He tried to persuade her. Emoya, you should go back first. I'll stay here and deal with it. I'll let you know as soon as there are results. Emoya also knew that she had caused trouble for everyone. She raised her hand in apology, but she was still a little unwilling. Suddenly, she reached out and pinched the child's cheek. Hey, stubborn child, I'm leaving if you don't respond. It's not too late to regret it. As long as you follow me, I'll serve you hot drinks and cakes.
Huh?
Strangely enough, in the biting cold wind, her hands were almost frozen stiff, but the child's thin cheeks were still tender and warm, which was very nice to touch. Little did she know that Long Chi, who was in a shadowy corner in the back alley, was watching with his eyes twitching. There was a certain distance between them, but Long Chi was able to confirm who that thin child was. His head and body were covered in a layer of snow powder. His previous partner, the Valiant Fist 2 and the Big-Hearted Wall 5, had suffered heavy injuries from this child's all-penetrating, all-decaying attack. Their bodily functions had been severely damaged, and they had fallen victim to Jack's evil hands on the way back. Fist 2 had died on the spot, and Wall 5 had kept his life. However, he was no longer suited for frontline work, and in the end, he resigned in dejection. In that nightmarish night, Long Chi, who had moved out under the code name Snake 7, hated that shameless and savage cyborg the most. But that guy was already done for. What was left was this child. He seemed to be called Ruewen. He didn't know what kind of energy was contained within her thin and slender body. She actually managed to forcefully break through their 7-man Deep Blue team's encirclement. In the end, they had to use a particle cannon at all costs to knock her unconscious. From an objective point of view, it seemed like their side was a bit more shameless. No matter what, Long Chi, codenamed Snake 7, held extremely complicated feelings towards the child in the alley. He wouldn't be like that stupid woman overflowing with motherly instincts. She wouldn't directly play some killing by touching someone's face. She might even get her arm broken. Since touching someone's face was dangerous, then this mission itself, many thoughts spun in Long Chi's mind. He exchanged information with the higher-ups who had issued the order, communicating the specifics of the mission. Not even 2 minutes passed before another order was transmitted over. Snake 7, from now on, observe and await orders.
Huh.
Deep Blue, you're a high-ranking employee of Sky Blue Security right now. If you want to earn some extra money, do you need me to help you cancel your employment contract? But please pay a penalty in advance. Understood. Long Chi immediately shrank back. Or perhaps it could be said that he found a reason to stay away from danger. But then he couldn't help but say, Dr. Bai, aren't you worried about your contract? A doctor who came out of Clay's laboratory won't be without a job anywhere. The important thing is that I don't have a penalty clause. The problem is that you also came out of the Apocalypse laboratory. Coming out of there. Are there any living people? Long Chi didn't say these words out loud. Ever since Dr. Bai Xinyan became the person in charge of the Sky Blue Security's Xia City branch, the dozens of Deep Blue Walkers had come to understand more and more the principle of people under the eaves have no choice but to lower their heads. As a high-ranking researcher who is well-versed in burner theory and the theory of the human body system, Bai Xinyan could adjust their training courses at any time. She could let the trainees have a deep understanding of the obvious difference between heaven and hell, under the premise that it wouldn't be obvious and that it wouldn't affect the results. All right, please instruct. Standardize the mode of operation. Observe and await orders.
Yes.
In the official operations of the Deep Blue Walkers, skipping ranks to command was a matter that was explicitly forbidden. Long Chi only needed to set the information reception to combat readiness mode, and then he could only accept combat orders from his direct superior. Of course, this also meant that the other command that was still clamoring in his ears right now would be completely blocked out. Long Chi hesitated a bit. Should he directly feign ignorance towards Deep Blue, or should he inform them? At this time, a car came to a stop on the other side of the alley. Someone opened the door and got off the car just as it came to a stop. The alley wasn't long. Long Chi borrowed the streetlight to clearly see the person's face, and the other person's penetrating cold gaze swept over a hair's breadth. Hiss. It was at this moment that Deep Blue became much more anxious. Long Chi, are you listening? Reporting the target's situation. Follow-up support is already on the way. Hello? Hello? Support my ass. Chapter 503. In the middle of the alley, Haijing really didn't want Emoya to stick to him anymore, so he went forward and forcefully pushed her out. Let's go, let's go. Leave this to me. I'll send you a photo of the scene every 5 minutes, okay? Emoya frowned. I think I'm about to convince him. That must be your illusion. While they were arguing, a car sounded at the entrance of the alley. Someone got out. At first, they thought that it was the social welfare agency, but when the street light fell on the person's face, Emoya could not help but be surprised. Luonan, what are you doing here? When I was passing by, I saw your nanny van. The reason that Luonan blurted out could be said to be full of flaws. But right now he wasn't in the mood to weave a more complete lie. His gaze went straight past Amoya's shoulder. From this angle, he could only see Ink flapping its wings from time to time. Ink being here was actually Luo Nan's arrangement. Because Amoya, who was always on the move, was not suitable for a large number of security personnel. For the sake of ensuring her safety, Luo Nan sent the idle Ink to Amoya's side after completing the Trigate security mission. Ink followed Amoya 24 hours a day. If anything unexpected happened, Ink could intervene through the closed system. But Luo Nan never expected that this sort of arrangement would actually attract Rue when over. Luo Nan walked forward with quick steps. His reason kept reminding him to pay attention to his concealment, to not let Amoya see through him. But as his line of sight extended, he saw a thin and gloomy little girl with almost no feminine features sitting in the corner. She was covered in snow powder, sitting under a pile of junk. He saw human figures and other distorted shadows covering her, but the girl was silent. There was only the crow in her eyes. Rue was in a completely different dimension from the others. She didn't care about others, and no one really understood her. Luo Nan's heart felt a bit stifled when he saw this scene. Sentences such as, "The stallion stands alone," "The shadow hangs by itself," from the ancient texts he had learned suddenly materialized. They transformed into a surging black tide that flooded his mind. All right, perhaps Rue didn't need pity, but the feeling still lingered in Luo Nan's heart. It was hard to dissipate in the end. Qin Ikuan quickly walked past him. Amoya and Hai Jing said something to him. Luo Nan was aware of these circumstances, but he didn't make the appropriate response. This was because his emotions were rising and falling like the tide. The speed of his brain was affected. Luo Nan himself didn't understand why the emotions in his mind were this intense. He was unable to resolve this doubt for a time. He just passed by Amoya and arrived at the side of the junk pile to face Rue. Then, he saw that the girl was casually kneeling on the ground, holding the ink bottle with one hand, and there seemed to be a slight smile on her lips. Luo Nan half knelt in front of the girl in the next moment. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. Strictly speaking, this was his first official meeting with Rue. In the past, their communication was either through ink or through a closed system. Rue also sensed something. Her gaze moved away from the ink for the first time to fall on Luo Nan's face. There was no change in his expression, only his eyes were sparkling. "He raised his head," someone exclaimed. Then, Amoya's voice rang out. "He's reacting to you. As expected, it's better to be around the same age?" Luo Nan didn't say anything, but he came to a realization in his mind. Forgive him for overstepping his bounds and standing in Rue's position. No matter what the nature was, he really was Rue's only coordinate relative to this world at this current stage. It must be known that Rue had already found Ink, the person she believed to be of the same species. Then, she was surrounded by a circle of people. Presumably, she wasn't feeling too comfortable. With her abilities, she could escape into the mental plane once more and break away from this environment. As for misgivings? With her usual reactions, they simply didn't exist. But why didn't she move? Luo Nan knew that at least a part of the reason was because of the information he transmitted through the closed system. Just like the gaze that was cast over right now. He, Luo Nan, possessed a certain degree of existence in Rue's heart. He even possessed a sense of identity. This was good news, right? Rue didn't look at Luo Nan for too long. She shifted her gaze and spoke to Ink in a low voice. Perhaps Ink's intelligence was higher than 99% of Crow's, but this didn't mean that it was able to understand Rue's meaning. To put it bluntly, this was a one-way communication between chickens and ducks. But when Luo Nan looked straight at Rue, he saw the faintly discernible smile on her lips. It was an attitude of tranquility and satisfaction. Luo Nan grew more and more speechless when faced with this situation. But it was also at this time that his train of thought opened up a bit. He suddenly understood where the surging tide of emotions in his heart came from. Actually, it was him. Luo Nan looked at Rue right now. It was like he was looking at himself when he was experimenting alone. He would be excited because he was still alive after increasing the dosage of the drug. He would also be satisfied because the degree of pain he felt after taking the drug one day was slightly reduced. But was that really satisfaction? That should be the respite he felt after temporarily escaping from hell. It was also the hypnotic pleasure brought by the glimmer of light when he faced an unreachable goal, when he couldn't see the complete path. As Luo Nan grew older, he became more accustomed to the recent 2 or 3 months of leaps and bounds in his accomplishments. He recalled the muddle-headedness of his first experiments and often shuddered with fear. How much luck did he use in order to endure through the initial juncture? This question was already incalculable. But Luo Nan felt that there was no difference between the current Rue Wen and him back then. He was practically 100% certain that even if Rue Wen were to face death, she would probably be like this right now. This was because she had never understood or experienced what a normal, splendid life should be like. The laboratory and the fighting arena filled up everything that Rue Wen once was. There are some things that I need to properly teach you, even though I'm not too good at it. Luo Nan spoke in a low voice. His voice was fuzzy and hoarse. Even he himself nearly couldn't hear it clearly. Luo Nan. Emoya felt that something was wrong. Luo Nan didn't respond. He just extended his hand towards Rue Wen. Come. Together. Rue Wen shifted her gaze once more. She tilted her head slightly, probably due to ink blocking her view. So much so that she carried a bit of careless childishness. Perhaps it was the closed system that allowed them to communicate telepathically. Or perhaps it was the face-to-face communication that transmitted sufficient information. Rue Wen didn't move. She allowed Luo Nan's hand to reach over. There was a slight commotion behind them. At the same time, the snow powder swirled past their eyes. It was just like the gazes and attitudes of the people in the outside world. It didn't cause any interference. Luo Nan grabbed Rue Wen's left arm. The girl's arm was slender and slender. It could be grasped. It was this arm that was supporting the massive body of ink right now. Next, Luo Nan lightly exerted force. The girl was like a ghost that didn't exert any strength at all. She gracefully stood up. A thin layer of snow powder slid down from her shoulder. Some of it landed on the wrists and arms of the two, quickly melting away. Although not many of the surrounding people understood what was going on, they still let out a breath of relief. Only Luo Nan felt the pressure in his heart grow, even though he didn't use any strength in his hand. From this moment on, the connection between him and Rue Wen was no longer illusory. Instead, it was a carrier that truly merged with reality. All the people in the know, the onlookers behind them, the people with ulterior motives hidden in the shadows, and the fellows who were hiding their heads and showing their tails were all witnesses. Mr. Luo. Wayne took the initiative to communicate with him. What she said was very realistic. For the sake of safety, let us take over right now. Luo Nan just needed to nod his head, and the Xia City branch would shoulder this burden. The iron triangle formed by President Ouyang, Old Yu, and Her Majesty Empress Wu would be one of the most headache-inducing combinations in the world. The impenetrable wall they constructed was enough to make those with ulterior motives break their heads and bleed. This was, without a doubt, the most reasonable choice. However, Luo Nan couldn't help overstepping his boundaries. He tried to consider things from Rue Wen's point of view. Should he let her return to the intensive care unit? Or should he watch her over and over again in the snowy night with a crow as her companion, talking to herself in her own world for all eternity? This wouldn't do. I'll accompany her for a while. Luo Nan himself didn't have a clear understanding of what a while meant. As a non-security personnel who needed a bodyguard to protect him, there were many things he didn't have a sufficient position on. Let's just say that he had a childish illness. Luo Nan needed to clearly understand his own responsibilities and obligations. They were right before his eyes. Otherwise, this illusory courage and responsibility, which might have arisen from impulsiveness, might be crushed by the heavy pressure behind him. It would be hard to leave a trickle behind. Wayne didn't respond immediately. She seemed to be weighing the pros and cons. This reaction startled Luo Nan a bit. Could it be that Wayne was once again indulging his willfulness out of habit? Or could it be that his proposal had a benefit that even he himself wasn't clear about? Luo Nan didn't understand for a time, but this gave him the confidence and reason to continue persevering. We'll be together. I can't speak of anything else, but at the very least, in this world, a fellow who can do something unfavorable to us and catch us unprepared has yet to be born. Luo Nan really didn't have the face to say these last words. But in this moment when his thoughts were clear, he really did do something. Ink was a bit restless. It flapped its wings, and this time the force restricting its flight suddenly disappeared. It flew into the air as if relieved of a heavy burden, circling above the alley. But at this time, the snow powder floating down from the sky suddenly became much more sluggish. Icy cold liquid seeped in through the gaps between Ink's feathers. It was very uncomfortable. In the shadows of the alley, Long Seven was under Qin Ikuan's near face-to-face surveillance. He behaved like an ambassador of peace. His entire body didn't make any unnecessary movements. But at this moment, he subconsciously raised his head. The water droplets hit his face and immediately turned into ice. The cold penetrated into his bones. It was unknown when, but the fluttering snow powder transformed into a special form between ice particles and water droplets. Was it hail or freezing rain? Chapter 504. Why aren't you moving? He's right there. We need to observe. I just need him to cooperate. I'm not asking him to risk his life. I need to outsmart him. Then, that's really unfortunate. That unlucky bastard has already been exposed. Do you remember? He once met your target face to face. If you really want to go, then it won't be outsmarting him. It'll be a provocation. Not only do you want him to go provoke a dangerous target, but you want him to provoke a paranoid maniac who can slaughter half of Xia City at any time? What does half of Xia City have to do with me? You're very clear on C-2834's value. Her value is immeasurable. Don't talk about half of Xia City. 10 Xia Cities, 100 Xia Cities. Are you sure that the Federation Council agrees before you say these words? There are 88 large metropolitan areas in the world. 100 Xia Cities. How do you convert them? Don't try to sell your glib tongue. Think about your ex. I'm not married, and I don't have a formal relationship. What do you mean by ex? We're not familiar with each other. I can see you for slander if you speak carelessly. By Xinyan. The other side slammed the table. You've been in Xia City for the past 2 months. You haven't done a single thing that you should have done. Instead, you've gotten along well with the Xia City branch. You've put in a lot of effort in treating Luo Nan's injuries. Now you're evading in every possible way. I seriously doubt your position. If this matter isn't handled properly, then you'll have to take full responsibility. The irrational communication was cut off at this point. But then again, wasn't the other side just shouting that last sentence? Everything was a routine. Bai Xinyan didn't care, but she wouldn't let the other side succeed. After the communication was cut off, she immediately sent a text message to the other side. Appeal to the higher-ups. I'll let you go first. 3 seconds later, the communication was connected again. It was the same person, but the hysterical mood was close to non-existent. He was just a bit irritated and helpless. What the hell do you want? This is what I want to ask. Ever since C-2834 entered the Shangding building, all relevant information has been reported to the lab through a stable channel. I can imagine that in the future, as long as C-2834 is under the control of the Xia City branch, there will be a steady stream of information. What else do you want? Research requires first-hand information. You should understand that the existence of C-2834 indicates that there is a huge problem with the direction of the Bloodline project. If we can't find the root of the problem, this project will be stalled indefinitely. Instructor Li Wei is very angry about this. We are also under a lot of pressure. Speaking of that name, the voice on the other side instinctively lowered. I understand. That's why you're acting like a cornered dog jumping over a wall. Or rather, you're putting on a show for that person. The other party froze. Bai Xinyan smiled. Fortunately, you haven't completely lost your rationality. At least, you still have the idea of outsmarting the enemy. The beginning is still acceptable. Even if the follow-up plan is too horrible to look at, that's not a big deal. As long as you understand that your life is precious, this is still an era where you can be willful if you have money. The other party spoke again. What do you think? I'm now the manager of Quantum Holdings, so I naturally have to consider things from the company's standpoint. Therefore, I think that as a company, the person at the helm must show the courage of a capitalist. If the project can be solved with money and can be profitable in the end, don't consider other means. Throw money at him. Too rough. Right now, storytelling is rather popular in the capital market, especially in the early stages. We can first test the waters. What do you think of the name Miss 2 in 1,000? The other party was silent again. As a senior executive of the Deep Blue World Joint Project, he was deeply involved in the relevant matters. Of course, he knew what the ratio of 2 in 1,000 meant. Just over a month ago, they had a business discussion with the Ability User Association's headquarters. They had offered 2 in 1,000 shares of the Deep Blue World Joint Project in exchange for the rights to C-2834. At the time, they had wanted the headquarters to take the lead and attempt to circumvent the protection of the two extraordinaries. Unfortunately, they hadn't been able to do so in the end. Instead, Gong Qi, who had led the team into Xia City, had lost quite a bit of face. Now that Bai Xinyan had brought up the old matter again, he immediately understood the meaning behind it. 2 in 1,000 of 8 trillion was 16 billion. Money itself didn't have any meaning. The Deep Blue World Joint Project had a lot of information, as well as the research results that were about to make a huge breakthrough because of this Miss 2 in 1,000 were the most valuable parts. As far as the parties who had already participated in the project were concerned, the information and results were all clearly marked on the agreement. 2 in 1,000 was 16 billion. It wouldn't increase their rights and interests by much, but it also wouldn't cause any considerable losses. But as far as the other capitals and powers in the world were concerned, the qualifications they didn't have the opportunity to obtain in the past were the most important. Even if it was still a bottomless pit for the time being and they had to continuously throw money into it, once the results were out, 16 billion? 8 trillion? That was nothing. This was a super project that could affect the entire era. Originally, it was just a targeted distribution, but all of a sudden, it was a public offering. Regardless of whether the information was true or not, for the sake of the astronomical profits in the next few decades, it was easy to imagine that there would definitely be capital parties and powers burning with greed to make such an investment. Of course, there might also be desperados who had delusions of getting rich overnight. 16 billion was already an enormous amount of wealth that could establish a considerable foundation. And from beginning to end, they only needed to leak a little bit of information. They didn't even need the authorization of the board of directors. In any case, that 2 in 1,000 was the portion that had to be sent out. The Ability User headquarters even had to share some of the suspicion. Everything was ready, and there wouldn't be any obvious evidence left behind. Light as a feather, but it would stir the overflowing hearts of people. In the face of greedy hyenas from all sides, even if Xia City had the Iron Triangle, they would still be flustered for a period of time. After all, desperados didn't have the sensitive points that major powers would be wary of in a confrontation. And in the field of capital, they would break through all bottom lines. You have a grudge with them, right? The other side had completely forgotten the suspected collaboration with the enemy at the end of the previous communication. In his opinion, this kind of ruthless extermination plan was not a blood feud, so there was no reason to do so. Haha. Bai Xinyan laughed without any sincerity. She skipped over this topic and moved on to a more realistic level. And your plan. Although it's terrible to look at, it's enough to throw a brick to attract jade. While you're at it, it's also enough to make the information true. During this period of time, because of the problems with the 2 orders of justice and blood flame, Xia City has filled in a lot of unstable factors. These are all resources that can be used. Okay. Hey, where are you going? A friend is in trouble, so of course I have to help. I'm very clear about the issue of my position. The legendary black-hearted salt really lived up to his name. The radio waves shuttling back and forth in Xia City were gradually permeating with malice. But in the small alley behind the bar, people were still struggling over the details. You two seem to have quite the affinity. Emoya rubbed her chin and looked at the two half-grown children standing side by side. She had a lot of doubts in her heart, but now is not the time to be calculative. Since you two can get along so well, just bring him home. Let's ask Dad to help and see if he can figure out the child's identity. As a high-ranking employee of the SCA, Mo Haiheng did indeed have the ability to do so. However, Emoya said it so casually that Haijing also had a headache. It wasn't that he didn't have sympathy, but for a normal person, wasn't it the best choice to let the police handle it? The young police officer, who sent the police on the other side, also had a headache. If we can't find any information, this child is most likely an illegal resident. The voice behind him became softer. He also felt that Haijing was the only reliable one in this group of people, so he discussed with him. I suspect that this child may be a wilderness vagrant. Let's take the child back to the police station first, and then let the Civil Affairs Department handle it. Vagrant? Yes, there have been a lot of vagrants entering the city recently, and many of them haven't completed the procedures. According to the regulations, these illegal residents must be registered by the Civil Affairs Department and either sent back to the designated temporary residential area or to the designated welfare center. Where are the residential areas and the welfare center? The police officer found the closest ones and showed them to Haijing. The latter was shocked. Why are they all in the west? Of course. After all, Xia City is surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, and only the west side is close to the wilderness. The government also followed the principle of the nearest settlement. That side is more than 100 kilometers away from the coastal area. How did the child get here? While they were talking, the late staff of the Child Welfare Center finally arrived at the scene. His explanation was similar to the young police officer. There's no information at all. The most likely possibility is that he's an illegal resident from the residential area. Now, there are 2 choices. Either his relatives in the residential area claim him, or he'll be temporarily taken in by the welfare center and wait for the charity to adopt him. The Child Welfare Center that Haijing notified was a government department under the SCA. The person who came was a civil servant, and he looked quite capable. He used his wristband to take a picture of Rue Wen and said, "We need to complete the information here, but it's too late today. Let's find a place to settle down first. Tomorrow." Oh. Tomorrow is Sunday. We need to wait until Monday for the relevant procedures to be completed. He operated his wristband. There's an empty bed at the Santa Maria Charity Hall 27 kilometers away. This welfare center isn't close, but it's backed by a hospital. The facilities are more complete, and it's more convenient to collect information. Emoya and Haijing glanced at each other. It seemed that this was a good way to handle things. Just then, Luo Nan raised his hand. How about this? I'll stay with her at the welfare center for 1 night. When that time came, the branch should be able to prepare the relevant information. Setting up the identity of a vagrant and appointing an adoptive family was a good background. You? The staff of the welfare center furrowed his brows. You are? We're the informants. The older sister had to bear the burden of her younger brother's willfulness, and this was a good thing. Emoya roughly communicated, but the staff of the welfare center shook his head. That's not necessary. We have professionals looking after her. Do you think she'll be obedient if I don't accompany her? Luo Nan was still holding on to Rue Wen's wrist. He didn't let go for even a moment. Emoya turned her head and suddenly realized that something was wrong. The police stepped forward and reported the situation to the staff of the welfare center. The staff of the welfare center had a serious expression when they learned of the situation. Everyone, this isn't just a matter of charity. It also involves the basic collection of information in today's society, the placement of vagrants, and a series of other technical issues. We will be responsible for the vulnerable, but we also need to be responsible for the SCA and the relevant social order at the same time. So, The staff of the welfare center paused, and a stiff smile appeared on his face. "You can follow. We welcome the public to supervise our work, but please don't interfere with the normal procedures." The matter was barely resolved now that it had reached this point. The young police officer finished recording the incident and left. Luo Nan's group, along with Emoya and Haijing, followed the vehicle of the welfare center to the Santa Maria Charity Hall. Since the nanny van had already left, Luo Nan made arrangements. "Me, Rui-1, Sis, Brother Haijing will all sit in the same van. Brother Qin can sit in the front. The back of the van is spacious. The four of us can still fit in." There were no problems with his arrangement, but Emoya cast a subtle glance at him. "Rui-1, you know each other?" "I just asked. You didn't hear me when you were talking to the police." Emoya narrowed her eyes, but she didn't say anything. The group of people got on the van, and they followed the vehicle of the welfare center. Rui-1 sat by the window. She was looking out the window at the direction where ink was flapping its wings. "It'll be fine. It'll definitely follow." Luo Nan knew what she was thinking and hurried to comfort her. During this time, the feedback of the closed system continued to affect Ink's body. Aside from the enlargement of its body, the bald crow's strength, agility, endurance, and other hard indicators all increased. Its flying speed was at least twice that of its peers. It could even be compared with some falcons. Rui-1 didn't respond, but Luo Nan understood that she already knew. From Rui-1's perspective, Ink and Luo Nan were her main focus. It was enough for her to pay attention to them for the time being. But from Luo Nan's perspective, the things he had to worry about had begun to rapidly expand from the moment he held Rui-1's arm. Many of them involved areas he had never touched before. This was undoubtedly an enormous challenge. But Luo Nan wasn't afraid. He had Rui-1 by his side, and she had placed her trust in him. The illusory courage and sense of responsibility in his heart was hammering into reality bit by bit. He had to do something, and he was already doing it. A thin layer of sweat seeped out of his body. This was a natural reaction after consuming energy. And right now, the rate at which his soul strength increased was rapidly slowing down. Even his reserve water level was dropping. Outside the window, the freezing rain grew denser and denser. It was mixed with fine ice shards that hit the van with rustling sounds. A gap had already opened up in a corner of the void within this icy curtain of rain. An invisible soul cloak was wantonly expanding in this area where water molecules were rich. It was heading east. It had already plunged into the domain of the ocean. It was heading west at a speed far beyond the reach of vehicles. It covered Linhai, Lilan, Nade, East City, South City, Zhongshu, and the other 6 or 7 administrative districts of Xia City. It covered an area of nearly 10,000 square kilometers. In a few more minutes, West City, Pingjiang, River Wu, Woodwall, and the other western administrative districts would be covered by the Soul Cloak. Chapter 505. The small mechanical spider crawled along the corridor. It was fast, but it didn't bump into any railings or corners. This was a popular bionic toy, and it was also the favorite of the children in the orphanage. Many people might think that it was ugly, but most children still thought that it was cute and sometimes cool. Especially when it was wandering in the dark, its 6 sensory eyes would flicker unpredictably. It could scare people to the point that they would jump in fright. Without a doubt, this was the favorite of those naughty kids. The toy spider in the Santa Maria Charity Hall was only a basic version. Although the 6 sensory eyes could send and receive signals and identify directions and obstacles so that they wouldn't be reduced to mere decorations, they didn't have imaging functions. However, for some people, a simple stream of information was enough. 2 blocks away from the Santa Maria Charity Hall, the straight-line distance was about 3.5 kilometers. Inside a high-rise office building, the lights were still on at 10 o'clock in the evening on the 75th floor, even though it was a weekend. The relevant personnel were hurrying to set up the relevant equipment, and some people were already playing in front of the temporary workbench. Come on, give me a big signal. Get out, I'll shoot you in the face with little noise," the young black man in front of the workbench, was wearing headphones. His body continued to move rhythmically, and he was completely immersed in self-entertainment. Nobody bothered him. On the one hand, this was his working state, and on the other hand, it was none of their business. The light screen in front of the young black man was full of irregular red, green, and blue blocks, which were constantly piecing together and changing according to his rhythm. There seemed to be some pattern, but overall, it was still very blurry. Ba-Tu, the operations director of Putt Service Company, stood behind the young black man with a serious expression, but he was actually quite envious. The noise in front of him was a very outstanding reconnaissance ability user. He could capture monotonous and fragmented signals and complete the outline of the scene. He could also carry out high-power active interference. Through specific amplification equipment, his range of influence could reach hundreds of kilometers away. He could be described as a human-shaped radar and electronic interference system. Such talents were usually intercepted by the military early on, and so was noise. However, this guy had psychological problems. He claimed that he was big and couldn't control his crotch, so he should have been shot if he committed a crime in the military. However, he was taken out by a certain powerhouse and joined the powerhouse's team, continuing to cause trouble outside. Tonight was a joint operation between Putt Service Company and that powerhouse team. According to the accurate information obtained from both sides' channels, the current temporary resident of the Santa Maria Charity Hall, the girl named Rue Wen, already had a net worth as high as $16 billion. Moreover, it was a discount from the shares of the Deep Blue World joint project. Whether the information was true or not, it would be up to his superiors to judge. As for how to interpret the value of the information, there was no need to go into detail. The most realistic situation was that every power would swarm over as the news spread. They must seize it as soon as possible. The branch in Xia City would also respond quickly. It was hard to say what would happen next. But tonight, because Rue Wen had entered the secular world, she was placed in this charity hall. She was temporarily separated from the core protective network of the Xia City branch. Without a doubt, this was their best and last chance. Putt Service Company was a medium-sized assassination service provider. It couldn't be considered to be at the top of the industry. Noise's metal hunting group was an extraordinary business, but there was still a considerable disparity when compared to the standards of the Xia City branch. Even if both sides joined forces, they still didn't possess the strength to directly confront Ouyang Chen and Her Majesty Empress Wu. Too extraordinary. They could only catch them off guard by surprise. Of course, they also needed to have sufficient methods of shifting the blame. Only then could they guarantee that they would be able to escape unscathed regardless of the mission's success or failure. Ba-Tu could roughly guess the inside of the powerhouse behind the metal hunting group. Aside from the standard of strength, Putt Service Company was chosen because they had a ready-made network and team in Xia City. They also valued their mercenary channels that covered every major city in East Asia and the vagrant tribes of the wilderness. They also valued their superclass shifting skills. It just so happened that Xia City had recently accepted several vagrant tribes. Dragons and snakes were mixed in them. There were a lot of desperados who were experts in their studies. Just as Ba-Tu was thinking about how to deal with the aftermath, someone walked into the workshop. The 2-meter-tall and sturdy body was very conspicuous. It was like the sound of metal plates rubbing against each other. There was a powerful oppressive force. "You still haven't released the map, Mr. Gang Xiong?" Ba-Tu greeted him. His gaze swept past the man's shoulder and neck structure, and he saw that Noise was jumping high and did not respond, so he said on his behalf, "It's raining now. The disturbance is probably not small." The person who came was the third in command of the metal hunting group, Throat Splitter Gang Xiong. He was a very famous veteran architect and a B-rank powerhouse. Rumor has it that he once had a large part of his throat torn off, but he relied on his tenacious life force to survive. He only underwent a physical transformation. From then on, he liked to tear people's throats when he killed them. He received the fierce name of Throat Splitter. After Gang Xiong entered the workshop, He took on the responsibility of commanding. He asked about the progress of the technical team. How's the cracking going? We still need around 10 minutes. The security system of the charity hall is connected to the Santa Maria Church Hospital. It will be quite troublesome to hack in. Mr. Gang Xiong, we can take advantage of this time to have a brief tactical meeting. Motherf asterisk her. Ba Tu choked. Fortunately, he knew that Noise had made a breakthrough. This black bro threw off the monitoring headphones. He straightened his buttocks and screamed in excitement. Noise was a scumbag, but his skills were top-notch. As he screamed, the meaningless color blocks on the screen quickly decreased. It was like a streaming video with an unstable signal. There were more lags and mosaics, but the basic outline of the video was already visible. Sand table. Gang Xiong signaled his assistant to do something. Very soon, the digital sand table that had just been placed in the middle of the room displayed a panoramic 3D projection of the Santa Maria Charity Hall. It was a translucent grayish-white color. But a few seconds later, Noise was more or less settled. The relevant data was transferred to the sand table and bright colors were smeared over it layer by layer. At the beginning, there were some mosaics, but it quickly became clear. Especially in the special marked areas, a few human figures appeared. In the sand table projection, they were about the size of a finger, but their appearances were similar. The details were exquisite, and they were lifelike. They were the target of their target tonight. The charity hall was quite generous to temporary guests. The individual room on the first floor of the residential area was located at the corner of the building. Because of the flower bed, it could be considered a relatively independent half-enclosed courtyard. It was relatively quiet, and it was easy to make a move. Noise was ecstatic. Damned weather, damned weather, damned weather. I'll let you guys experience it. The sand table projection was covered by a blurry curtain of rain as soon as he finished speaking. Ba Tu furrowed his brows, but didn't say anything. It wasn't bad to be able to restore the scene in a more complete manner. Through this curtain of rain, he could also see a few details. In this freezing rain environment, low-altitude drones can be eliminated. A large lump of ice will fall in less than a few minutes. Gang Xiong was expressionless. He tapped the edge of the sand table with his finger. What else? Ba Tu was stunned, and Noise began to laugh mischievously. At the same time, the blank area in the sky above the projection showed the avatars and simple information of the 5 targets. Professional bodyguards with ability, former military deep blue walkers, and this, a humanoid infrasound array. Every time Noise mentioned a person's characteristics, a circle of special colored areas lit up in the projection area. Qin Ikuan's sensing range is approximately 30 meters. God's ability is a bit worse, approximately 20 meters. But you have to pay attention to the car parked beside the dormitory building. It is equipped with extremely sensitive sensing equipment. It is recommended that you don't use high-powered equipment within a 2-kilometer radius. Within 100 meters, you can view him as a mental sensing expert. Only now did Ba Tu know that Noise could actually capture information about the target's mental sensing range and reproduce it. It was truly inconceivable that his scouting ability could be displayed to such an extent. Noise had long since gotten used to this job. Of course, there's that youngster. Let's do a zoom. All right, we need to expand the range of the model. At least 3 kilometers. That shameless little fellow has a sensing radius of 3 kilometers. Ba Tu was stunned. Radius or diameter? Noise chuckled. Are your ears not good? I said it was a radius. Everyone's luck is pretty good. We're separated by 2 blocks and diverged by 500 meters. Otherwise, we would be carefully considering how to resolve the awkwardness. Resolve the awkwardness? It should be said that they were running for their lives. While Ba Tu rejoiced, he still found it somewhat hard to believe. A sensing range of 3 kilometers. Could that fellow be an extraordinary? Noise ignored him and continued with his work. Next, dark scars hung down one after another in the projection area. Gang Xiong was rather interested. What is this? I don't know. In any case, it's very irritating. Back when I was stuffed into the military prison and had my ass busted, it was more or less the same feeling. Just this information alone can be sold for 1 million or 800,000 without a problem. If any of you dare leak it out, you'll be my enemy. Batu's head was a bit swollen. If it really is 3 kilometers, any frontal operation is meaningless. Discussing this topic is really meaningless. Gang Xiong casually waved his hand, moving the 3 most threatening figures to one side and gathering the other 2 normal people in the middle. If these 5 people are all staying at the charity hall tonight, there's practically nothing we can do apart from forcefully attacking. This is the worst-case scenario. I'll consider canceling this operation. Batu nodded. I agree. Gang Xiong sneered. That's not very likely. The charity hall isn't a hotel, and our pioneers aren't idiots. From Batu's understanding, the so-called pioneer should be Quantum Holdings. According to the intelligence channels of the 2 partners, Luo Nan's group arriving at the Santa Maria Charity Hall had traces of Quantum Corporation's operations. Perhaps the other side also wanted to catch them off guard. Gang Xiong didn't care. We're only considering the latter scenario. This woman and her manager will leave. Maybe they'll give her a bodyguard. Maybe they won't. But no matter what, we're keeping an eye on her. A diversion? Don't speak nonsense. Gang Xiong swept his ice-cold gaze over. You must have forgotten this. His finger pointed at the core position marked on the sand table. Our target is this Rue one. She's also someone who dealt with Quantum Corporation's Deep Blue Walker Squad. It's said that her close combat abilities are extremely strong. Do you want to verify it? Gang Xiong waved his hand without waiting for Batu to respond. If we really touch her, our plan will pretty much be finished. So we're only considering her. Gang Xiong flicked his finger, forming fine ripples on the projected virtual interface. It doesn't matter how many people leave. We only want her. Get rid of the bodyguard and send the manager's head back. Also, Noise, it's time for you to show off. We need to record an additional video. Is it the kind I like the most? Noise's wide mouth opened, revealing white teeth and a purple tongue. Together with the light and shadow on the sand table, it formed a strange image. Can I let loose and play? Steel, you can always get to where I itch the most. That woman's waist and legs are too great. She's definitely a good gun rack. I'll take good care of her. I'll just break her 2 arms. Gang Xiong didn't pay attention to Noise's wild imagination. He just zoomed in on the projected area again, making the map show a wider area to plan the subsequent route. Putt Company's mercenaries will be useful after the attack begins. Stop them on the spot and delay the other side's rescue speed. It'll also give him time to watch the video. I hope you've made sufficient preparations. We've prepared 4 teams, and we've also prepared a wonderful disturbance. Batu was quite confident in his profession, but right now he was a bit unsure. But Mr. Gang Xiong, are you sure you want to make a move on that person's sister? If you mess up, we're cooperating with your company because we like your operational abilities. We have a good target to frame, right? That's right, but... No buts. That young man himself is worth 16 billion, but he definitely shouldn't tie himself to the future power of this planet. He and his family don't have this right. Gang Xiong acted like a philosopher. His thick lips cracked open. If he can survive, he might even be able to foil our operation tonight. But for a long period of time, he'll have to face similar situations. I hope he can make a choice in time. Otherwise, he'll definitely be running for his life until there's nothing left to look forward to. Batu didn't say anything, but he made up his mind to apply for a transfer after this. Otherwise, he might end up as cannon fodder. Gang Xiong concluded, what he does in the future has nothing to do with me. I need opportunities and time. I just want long legs. F***CK. 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 Noise responded loudly, getting more and more agitated. Gang Xiong still didn't care and continued planning the route. Our retreat direction is the sea. The closest place is the south coast. We can also avoid the Lilan district in the northeast. Oh, Gang Xiong, hurry up and start. My crotch is about to explode. As he spoke, Noise actually began to loosen his belt. He completely disregarded the current situation. This fellow was a complete pervert. I won't cut your thing, but I can pull out your throat. Gang Xiong finally issued a warning. Ba Tu let out a sigh of relief when he saw Gang Xiong restraining him, but he soon realized something. His expression quickly changed. Go to the sea? That's not what we originally agreed on.
Yes.
You want to enter the wilderness and use your outstanding ability to fish in troubled waters. And this is what we need. But if we head there directly, we need to traverse the entire city of Xia City. With the coverage of the psychic wave network, I don't think we have this opportunity. The sea is completely unobstructed. We can first enter the sea and then circle around the defensive line of the coastal defense forces. We can land ashore and cut into the interior from Mahjong. Although we'll take a long detour, we'll be able to catch many people off guard. Gang Xiong moved the core of the projection back to the charity hall. Before that, don't forget. Before we reach the sea, all we have are hostages and bargaining chips. The most important thing is how to get our hands on the target. Our boss is waiting in the open sea. Mr. Jin Tong? Ba Tu subconsciously felt a bit of reverence when he heard news of extraordinaries. Gang Xiong was even calmer. Boss Jean is coming from the sea. Of course we have to go to the sea. Otherwise, do you really think that Ouyang Chen and the martial monarch are watchdogs and ant queens? You won't take them out of their nest? Ba Tu was stunned for a few seconds before saying, of course it's great to have Mr. Jin Tong holding the line. But I'll have to talk to the higher-ups about the direction. Gang Xiong waved his hand. Do as you wish, but don't waste time. Ba Tu walked out with a gloomy face. He heard noises clamor behind him. How many times do you think I should fire? 70, 80, or 90 times. You believe I can do it, right? Shut up. No, no, no. You can't handle my enthusiasm.
Ugh.
A muffled explosion seemed to ring out in the room. The voice came to a screeching halt. Ba Tu rejoiced that Gang Xiong had finally taken precautions. When he closed the door, he turned his head to look, but he saw Noise's mouth open. Noise's hands were hanging down, and the waistband of his pants fell to the ground, revealing the toy inside. It was truly an eyesore. But the important thing now was that dark red liquid was surging out of Noise's mouth. His eyes, nostrils, and ears were all the same. Enemy attack, long-range sniper. This was Ba Tu's first reaction. He instantly fell to the ground, and at the same time, he exerted force in his legs and moved backwards. He even pulled the door and closed it, blocking the sniper's line of sight. His reaction could not be said to be slow. But at this moment, blazing red light shot out, filling the room in an instant, blasting the closed outer door into pieces. Ba Tu also saw that the color of the projection area was already completely covered in blood red, and the corresponding outline was rapidly becoming blurry. But in that patch of blood red light, there was clearly a shadow that looked like a mix of a spider and a human. It was ugly and malevolent, as if a nightmare had leapt into reality. Facing this demonic shadow, Ba Tu actually did not know whether the red light came from the projection or from the void. He only saw Gang Xiong take a defensive stance. His body shone with a metallic luster as he roared and retreated. At this moment, Ba Tu had already smashed open the door of the opposite room and slid in. But in just 1/100th of a second, the red light had already covered him. The most terrible thing was that the energy of this red light did not rush outwards, but was pulling in the opposite direction. It was like an invisible whirlpool, forcefully pulling Ba Tu's body towards the area where the blood-red light was the thickest. That center might be the fatal gates of hell. Ah! Ba Tu desperately stretched out his hand, wanting to grab the door frame of the opposite room. But the moment his fingers touched the frame, the suction suddenly disappeared. He slammed onto the ground, his head dizzy and his legs weak. He subconsciously turned around to take a look. The destruction of the equipment in the room was expected, but the destructive power was not as great as he had imagined. In front of the sand table, Gang Xiong stood with his back facing the door. He did not move, but his body seemed to be trembling nonstop. "Mr. Gangxiong?" Ba Tu asked in a probing manner. Before he finished speaking, he saw Gangxiong's enormous body instantly bend and twist. His muscles and bones shrunk into a ball amidst the fine tearing sounds. Then, it suddenly stretched, collapsed, and shattered. The same fate also included those operatives on the ground. An invisible force field covered the entire room, leading everything, but Ba Tu would rather believe that it was a demonic plate of flesh and blood that came from hell. The tearing sound that made one's teeth ache finally turned into a muffled explosion. Blood fog filled the room, and in front of the wantonly smeared colors, Ba Tu's mind was blank. But in his wide-open eyes, a figure was reflected. The blood fog that enveloped his body gradually became clear. Gangxiong. He knew he called the wrong name without saying it, but Ba Tu still could not help it. Where the blood fog gathered, that person turned around. This was a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance. Compared to the human-shaped giant bear Gangxiong, he was much thinner, but his body was also very strong. He was naked, not wearing a single thread of clothing. His eyes swept across the room and finally fixed on Ba Tu's. Ba Tu swore that he had never seen such a cold and empty gaze. Those eyes seemed to be filled with countless layers of black fog, and he could never see them clearly, but why did he feel that they were so familiar? Chapter 506. As his body gradually approached the surface of the sea, the light, sound, and subtle changes in temperature from the shallow water, as well as the lazily swimming fishes and shrimps, formed a vivid picture. Zhang Yingying's mind seemed to have melted into this shallow sea. Only the white rainbow was still vibrating, as if it hadn't had enough. "Who?" Zhang Yingying's head popped out of the sea and shook her head. Her cheeks touched some fine floating ice. These translucent ice shards floated and sank on the surface of the sea. Just by glancing at them, one could feel the bone-piercing cold. She didn't care about this. She just took a breath of air that she hadn't breathed in for a long time, and cold water droplets fell. Compared to the seawater, the freezing rain falling from the sky was even colder. It was said that this freezing rain, which was outside of the forecast, had been entrenched in Xia City for nearly 10 hours, and there were still no signs of it stopping. Zhang Yingying stepped on the water unhurriedly. At the same time, she exhaled the old and inhaled the new. She adapted to the temperature difference of nearly 20 degrees inside and outside the sea. Her improved physical fitness quickly suppressed the slight discomfort. After her body felt more comfortable, she blew a breath of air at the surface of the floating ice. The air that should have been warm blew out a sharp and cold smell. A shallow crack extended from the surface of the sea in front of him until it reached 30 meters away before disappearing. Baihong's power continues to increase. I can now be considered a sword fairy who can kill people with a breath. Zhang Yingying licked the corner of her lips. She had to admit that her lips and tongue were a little numb just now, and there was a small crack on the inside of her lips. This was the price of acting tough. Compared to the rapid advancement of the white rainbow innate skill, the strength of her body was actually unable to keep up. This was a rather bizarre matter. It could be said that his body and soul were out of balance, but it was a bit different. He would have to ask Her Majesty Empress Wu for guidance when he returned. Of course, they could consult him at any time. She had been bored at the bottom of the sea for almost 10 days, so she had to relax no matter what.
Today just so happened to be Sunday.
Taking a few of his best friends out for a walk or two in the wilderness would be the happiest thing in life. With that in mind, Zhang Yingying also turned on the Hexa-Ear's voice connection function. Soon, a series of push notifications sounded. At this time, she had already arrived at the bottom of the cliff facing the sea with the push of the waves. She skillfully jumped and climbed the cliff. The most eye-catching message came from Bai Xinyan. The weather in Xia City was clearly gloomy and damp, with freezing rain falling down. But the selfie of these sisters was a picture of the sun shining brightly and the sea of palms. Especially the angle of her selfie, It was obvious that she was lying on a beach chair. The photo was taken from her chest, revealing not only her crazy long legs, but also her first-class curves. Under the sunlight, her white jade-like skin was even more dazzling. By Xinyan's self-evaluation of this photo, which was enough to make men lick their screens, was, "Enjoy the sunshine, cherish life." Zhang Yingying liked the post and commented, "Slut, who are you trying to seduce with old photos?" Ding dong, the other side actually replied within seconds, "It's obviously the latest."
New?
Only then did Zhang Yingying realize that something was wrong. At this time, another voice rang out. It was still by Xianyan. "Using this to seduce a 16-year-old boy, will he be forgiven? Starting from 3 years, but for an old woman like you, it's a huge profit." Why does this sound so wrong? She sent him a private message. "Where are you? Let's go shopping." In Chan City, you can enjoy 2 kinds of holidays. When did you get there? Last night in Xia City. The weather isn't good, so hurry up and run. Zhang Yingying clicked her tongue. She felt that it was strange. She understood her friend's personality very well. The more senseless her words were, the more often there was a deeper meaning behind them. Did something happen? Bai Xinyan didn't say anything more to her. "See you in spring. You have to seize the moment to enjoy life and the sunshine." It was as if she had a terminal illness. Tui. Zhang Yingying wanted to ask a few more questions, but at this time, the topic she had been paying attention to was updated. It was on the headquarters website. Her Majesty Empress Wu had personally issued the RT-8313 Honor Points mission. It was supposed to be a historical number of people replying to the mission, and it was a benign exchange of pointers. But now, that loathsome Yi and her inventions of Spray Pot Man and Summer Blow had led it astray. It had become a battlefield for territorial killings. If it weren't for the fact that she was at a critical juncture in her cultivation, Zhang Yingying would have long since taken command and gone to war with those scum from headquarters. She hadn't vented in time, so she had been holding her breath. She maintained a high degree of attention and intense obsession with the situation over there. But what the hell was with this push news? Who gave this news to? Holy crap. Exploration News Agency, Xia City, December 9th. The Xia City Security Bureau has confirmed on the evening of the 8th that riots occurred in many areas of the city, resulting in many deaths. The Xia City Police Department has posted on their official social media accounts that the riots occurred around 2200 hours on the 8th. They involve a wide area, and the composition of the participants is complex. At present, 47 people have died in the riots. Of the 24 administrative districts of Xia City, 12 have already entered a state of emergency. The press release was in a rigid format, but the explosive content made people dumbfounded. Zhang Yingying was like this. She had already climbed to the middle section of the cliff, where she was temporarily resting in her little nest. She didn't have the mood to rest after seeing this news. She didn't even change out of her diving suit. She continued to climb and jump. She crossed over 2 layers of road and arrived at the very top of the cliff. It was also the highest point of the surrounding coastline. She climbed high and looked into the distance. She saw small patrol boats shuttling back and forth in the distant sea. She could even faintly see the silhouette of large warships on the surface of the sea even further away. She looked inland. There were very few vehicles on the Huanhai Highway. There were only a few armored vehicles. Could it be that there was a coup? Zhang Yingying subconsciously opened the topic page and unmuted the many discussion groups. Sure enough, whether it was the headquarters intranet or the Xia City Psychic Wave Network, the atmosphere had already exploded. There were far too many and too messy messages. Just RT-8313 alone had several thousand replies in a single night. There were many new memes interspersed within them. At first glance, it seemed as if it had been abandoned by history. Zhang Yingying could only start from the last floor she paid attention to. She climbed up the floors one by one to revise. She also read the news to make up for her lessons. It didn't take long for her to find the most important floor amidst the flood of replies. It was probably due to the excitement that caused his hands to tremble and his tongue to tremble. The speaker left behind a paragraph of confusing logic and subtle meaning. I don't know if it's drooping or not. I only know that Grandma's dripping sword is too terrifying. Her terror in Xia City is multiplied by 2. Fortunately, this message was accompanied by a more realistic video. Combined with the content of the video, it should be nighttime in Xia City. A large number of police cars and related police personnel were parked at the intersection of the streets. They were densely packed, but what was even more eye-catching was a corpse being carried out from the crowd. The person who recorded the video should be an internal member of the police. They even had the opportunity to do a close-up of the corpse's face. At first, the camera didn't capture the main point. It wavered on the corpse's fine armor, body characteristics, and other aspects. But soon, the person who recorded the video focused on the corpse's head. The eyes, nose, and mouth were all dark with blood. Especially the eyes. They were abnormally swollen. The crystal in one of the eye sockets had already exploded, leaving behind a black and red blood clot. What does this have to do with the dripping sword? It was a thoughtless message left by someone who didn't know the ropes. In the blink of an eye, people from all walks of life were educated. Please seriously watch Her Majesty Empress Wu's teaching video. This is how the dripping sword dies when it hits the eyes. This is the result of the dripping sword stabbing into the eye socket and then exploding after striking the brain. The cranial pressure rapidly rises, causing the 7 orifices to bleed. This person's brain is certainly already a lump of paste. There might even be brain juice in the blood flowing out of the 5 orifices. If you ask me, this appearance may look scary, but it's actually not the best. The most brilliant method should be to simply destroy the brain tissue, causing a person to die without a sound. But this method is too smoky. Although the last comment was a bit pretentious, it was still relatively pertinent. Quite a few people expressed their approval. But the facts proved that this pretentious criminal had revealed his true colors too early. The person who first uploaded the video soon posted a second video. Following the video, fully armed corpses were carried out one after another. The entire comment section trembled. Many people have died in total. From what I can see, there are no less than 15. I looked at it frame by frame. The video shows 17 people. At the end of the video, the camera turned to a skyscraper on the side of the street. The words Xia City XXX Hotel were written on it, proving the location. What happened to Xia City? The 17 people all died in the same way. They were all armed and armed personnel. The time of death seems to be relatively close. No matter how I look at it, it doesn't seem like they were tortured to death. In other words, the time of death of these people is very close. Perhaps it was only a few breaths of time. The one who used the dripping sword was actually a machine gun user, right? Some people didn't even have the safety on their guns. In the end, how simple were their deaths? Requesting ultra-clear pictures of the scene of the incident. As long as one stayed on this topic, most of them would be practitioners and enthusiasts of the dripping sword. What they loved the most was to analyze the structure of the dripping sword and unearth its potential. Therefore, when the 2 videos came out, the enthusiasm of the people rapidly exploded. And just as the people were discussing this scene spiritedly, it was already the 9th. In other words, it was around 5 o'clock in the morning. What followed was the news that Zhang Yingying had seen before. It made all the ability users who were paying attention to this matter understand. The death toll and the scene of the incident were far from what they understood from the video. There were less than 20 corpses at the scene. Where were the rest? Did they die in the same way? Did I float in the air the wrong way? Zhang Yingying couldn't help but ridicule herself. The atmosphere of Xia City was a complete mess overnight. As for herself, she couldn't help but think of a certain spray pot man when she saw the dripping sword. But even if she thought about it with her toes, this sort of pure slaughter wasn't something a child would do. As for the machine gun-style killing technique, aside from Her Majesty the Empress Wu, she really hadn't seen anyone else perform a similar demonstration. Just as she was letting her imagination run wild, a new related push notification arrived. It was a link to a live broadcast. She subconsciously clicked on it and saw a capable and experienced woman give a thumbs up from behind the screen. Frontline dispatch. Life combustion. I am a battlefield reporter who accidentally traveled to Sia City. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.